Chapter 1107. This kick was as fast as lightning. By the time the other party came to his senses, Lu Ming had already kicked him in the stomach. He screamed and flew out, landing in a row with the previous two people. He was sprawled on the ground, looking like a dog eating feces. "Ah! Bastard, you're dead meat! The elders of my celestial martial sword faction, as well as senior brothers Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang, are all here. They're not far from here. The news will spread out soon." A disciple of Tianwu Sword Sect yelled and threatened Lu Ming. Bam! Lu Ming strode over and stomped on the disciple's face, causing his face to rub against the ground. Wu Qingkong, Wu Tsang? They're just two pieces of trash who were killed by Lu Shaoqing in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm. If it weren't for the life talisman, they would have died long ago. I'll wait here for these two pieces of trash. If Lu Shaoqing can kill them, so can I. Lu Ming lowered his head and looked down at the three disciples of Tianwu Sword Sect. His cold voice echoed throughout the area. Everyone was stunned. This awesome commander is too awesome. He's going to wait here for Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang? Is he going to learn from Lu Shaoqing and kill supreme talents? Lu Shaoqing was a peerless supreme talent who was comparable to the five giants. How could a mere law enforcer compare to him? However, they couldn't help but admire Lu Ming's courage. Lu Ming was going to step on the disciple's face and wait here. The other two disciples of the Tianwu Sword Sect lay on the ground, not daring to say a word. They were afraid that they would be trampled on. However, in their hearts, they hated Lu Ming to the core. They could not wait to tear him into pieces. Tai Xing and the others were drenched in cold sweat. Tai Xing walked quietly to Lu Ming's side and said, "Commander, isn't this too much? What if the experts of Tianwu Sword Sect arrive? What's there to be afraid of? We're from the Law Enforcement Hall. We're here to enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What's there to be afraid of?" Lu Ming said casually. Tai Xing and the others were speechless. They could only bite the bullet and wait with Lu Ming. News of what happened here spread like a whirlwind. What? Was there such a thing? There's actually such a powerful commander? Let's go take a look. When many people heard the news, they didn't believe it at first. Then, they were extremely curious and wanted to go and take a look. Many disciples and geniuses from the Overlord factions were astonished when they heard the news. Over the years, the royal clan's power had been declining steadily. The law enforcement army was practically useless. The geniuses and disciples of the transcendent powers could do whatever they wanted in the Saint City. How would the law enforcement army dare to control them? They would rather curry favor with them. Now, there was actually someone who dared to beat up the Sky Martial Sword faction's genius. This piqued the curiosity of many, and they all rushed over to watch. In 8th Prince Xiezhen's residence, Xiezhen was drinking tea in the courtyard when Shijing rushed in. "Guard Shi, why are you in such a hurry?" Xiezhen asked. "8th Prince, it's about Ming Lu." Shijing Dao. "Oh? Is that blind guy dead yet? Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be able to survive, right?" "Humph! How dare you injure this prince? What a blind dog!" Xiezhen drank a mouthful of tea and said slowly. "He didn't die. That guy is really audacious. Huang Ke from the Huang family killed someone some time ago. He actually crippled Huang Ke's cultivation," Shijing replied. Crippled Huang Ke's cultivation? Didn't the Huang family come and kill Ming Lu?" Xiezhen asked curiously. "Of course they did. A spiritual god expert and an old monster with a perfected spirit embryo went. They even called the commander of the law enforcement army," Shijing said. "Oh? If that's the case, then Ming Lu isn't dead yet?" Xiezhen was curious. In his opinion, Ming Lu should have been slapped to death by the spiritual god of the Huang family. No. That Ming Lu's combat strength is amazing. He actually blocked the attack of the spiritual god and even used the carelessness of the Saint Emperor. Shijing gave a brief account of what had happened the last time. "Damn it! This Ming Lu actually has such a cultivation and even used the name of the royal clan. Humph! He's lucky to have escaped this calamity. After listening, Xiezhen's face turned ugly. He was very unhappy. Then, his expression changed and he said, "You said you rushed here because of Ming Lu? What happened to him?" He. This time, he's dead for sure. He actually beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect. Shijing told him about how Lu Ming beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect, and how he was waiting for the experts of the Sky Martial Sword sect. This Ming Lu is really audacious. Ha! Let's see how he's going to die this time. Let's go. We can't miss such a good show. Let's go and take a look. Xiezhen stood up excitedly and rushed over with Shijing. In the northeast of the Saint City, in front of the restaurant, Lu Ming stepped on the face of a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect and waited there quietly. In the sky, more and more people came and filled the sky. "Wu Tsang is here!" A loud shout shook the entire place. In one direction, many people opened up a path. In the sky over there, two figures were walking in the air. One of them was the second-grade sky pride of the Sky Martial Sword sect, Wu Tsang. Behind Wu Tsang was Shifang. This stunned Lu Ming for a moment. Then, he realized that Shifang must have reported to Wu Tsang. In fact, that was the case. When Shifang heard that Lu Ming had beaten up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect, he knew that his chance had come. He had always wanted to befriend a sky pride like Wu Tsang, but he never had the chance. Now, the chance had come. Without hesitation, he rushed to Wu Tsang's residence and passed the news to him. As expected, Wu Tsang was enraged and rushed over. Wu Tsang's footsteps were slow. Every step he took caused the sky to buzz and tremble. It seemed like it couldn't withstand Wu Tsang's anger. Wu Tsang's eyes were filled with killing intent. He said in a cold voice, "Trash of the Law Enforcement Hall, how dare you beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Good. Very good. Just you? Where's Wu Qingkong? I heard that you and your fellow disciples were beaten up badly by Lu Shaoqing. Today, I'll learn from Lu Shaoqing and beat all of you up. Unfortunately, it's just you." Lu Ming glanced at Wu Tsang casually and said indifferently. The crowd was stunned. Isn't this commander a little too arrogant? Wu Tsang alone isn't enough. He wants to beat up Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang like Lu Shaoqing? Who does he think he is? Wu Tsang was a second-grade sky pride. He was famous in the world and had reached the spiritual god realm. A sky pride like him couldn't be compared to an ordinary spiritual god. Lu Ming was able to block a blow from the Huang clan's spiritual god. Does he really think he can compete with such a sky pride? He's too naive. Many people shook their heads. They thought that this awesome commander was dead meat today. Tai Xing and the others had ugly expressions. They didn't dare to say a word. They just stood behind Lu Ming with gritted teeth. They had no choice. In such a situation, they could only hold on. "Ha, let's see how you're going to beat me up then." Wu Tsang laughed in anger and took a step forward. Boom! Heaven and earth shook violently. Sword chi surged into the sky and stirred up the wind and clouds. A terrifying light was emitted from Wu Tsang's body. Every ray of light was like a sword chi. Chapter 1108. Those who had never seen a second-grade genius in action were shocked. Is this the strength of a second-grade genius? His aura was too terrifying. Many people retreated frantically, afraid that they would be affected by Wu Tsang's sword. When such a genius attacked, his aura alone could kill an expert of the same level. This commander is dead for sure. Seeing Wu Tsang's aura, many people sighed. Wu Tsang was so strong. What could Lu Ming use to block him? Die! Wu Tsang shouted coldly. His palm was like a sword, bursting with light, forming a dazzling sword light that slashed towards Lu Ming. As the sword light slashed through, even the space was torn apart, revealing a dark and terrifying space crack. This is not good. Dodge! Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the rest were terrified. In the face of such a powerful sword, they felt that it was impossible to resist. Only death awaited them. They screamed and wanted to retreat, but they realized that their bodies were shrouded by a terrifying sword aura, making it hard for them to move. It's over, it's over. We're finally killed by this unreliable commander. Tai Xing and the rest had this thought flashing through their minds. But at this moment, they saw a long spear condensing in Lu Ming's hand. As the long spear shook, it buzzed and even the space trembled. At this moment, Tai Xing and the rest realized that the sword aura that shrouded them had disappeared and they had regained their freedom. Whoosh! Then, they saw Lu Ming holding the long spear and sweeping it out. This spear was like a long spear sweeping across the water. Wherever the long spear passed, ripples would appear in the space and these ripples would all gather on the long spear. Bang! The long spear and the sword light collided. There was only a slight sound and Wu Tsung's sword light was destroyed. He blocked it? Tai Xing and the rest were stunned. The surrounding onlookers were also stunned. This badass commander could actually block Wu Tsung's move? Since when was a commander of the law enforcement army so powerful? A bunch of questions flashed through the minds of the crowd. Wu Tsung was also stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect that a lowly commander of the law enforcement army could block his attack. Although he didn't use his full strength in that attack, it still made him feel embarrassed. Who was he? He was a famous second-class genius in the Central Continent, second only to the 5 young giants. How could he not take down a commander of the law enforcement army with one move? This made him burst out with even stronger killing intent, a blazing killing intent. Good, very good. So you do have some ability. But today, your fate has already been decided. Wu Tsung coldly shouted as the sword chi around his body became even hotter. His jinyuan continued to pour out before finally transforming into a sword chi that was several times more powerful than before, slashing towards Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming still casually swept out with a spear, dispersing Wu Tsung's sword energy, turning it into nothingness. Show me what you've got, or else it's not enough. Lu Ming cast a sidelong glance at Wu Tsung. Damn it! Wu Tsung shouted angrily as he unsheathed his sword. A shocking sword light shone as if it was going to split the heaven and earth apart. Kill! Wu Tsung held the battle sword in his hand. His power was incomparably terrifying. When the battle sword slashed out, the space shattered. Heavens, he's too strong! Wu Tsung is angry! This is too terrifying! Retreat, retreat! Many people cried out as they frantically retreated again. Whoosh! Lu Ming held the spear in one hand as the long spear in his hand slashed out violently. It became 1,000 meters long and swept out in a barbaric manner. With a bang, Wu Tsung's sword chi shattered once again. However, this time, Lu Ming did not stop. The terrifying giant spear continued to press towards Wu Tsung. Impossible! Wu Tsung shouted in disbelief. He had already used a divine-level martial skill in the previous move, but it was still defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? He could not believe it. What was most unbearable for him was that Lu Ming's spear swept towards him, giving him a strong sense of crisis. How could a mere enforcer, an ant-like thing, have such a powerful expert? Erupt, erupt! Wu Tsung roared in his heart as he unleashed his divine-level bloodline. He executed the bloodline fusion and turned it into a battle sword with shocking sword chi. Suppress! Lu Ming stepped into the air. The long spear contained the power of the suppressing hell skill. The spear changed its momentum and smashed towards Wu Tsung. Clang! The long spear clashed with the battle sword that Wu Tsung had transformed into. The attack from the battle sword was instantly defeated. The battle sword trembled violently before exploding with a bang. The battle sword exploded, revealing Wu Tsung's original body. His face was pale as he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. In the surroundings, everyone looked at the scene in disbelief. Wu Tsung was defeated. Wu Tsung was actually defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? What was going on? Was this still the commander of the Enforcer army? How could he be so powerful? Those who thought that Lu Ming was dead for sure almost bit off their tongues and stared with their eyes wide open. It was simply too unbelievable. As for Shifang, he thought that he was dreaming. Wasn't Ming Lu only at the 7th level of spirit embryo realm? Wasn't he just a disciple of Black Spear sect? How could he be so strong? His body started to tremble slightly due to disbelief. As for Tai Xing and the rest, they were completely petrified. The 3 disciples of Celestial Martial Sword sect were also petrified as they stared blankly at the sky. How weak! I thought a second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword sect would be strong. Lu Ming curled his lips, his face full of disdain. Wu Tsang was infuriated. He was so angry that he wanted to roar at the sky. In the past, he was terrifyingly talented and powerful. In Celestial Martial Sword sect, only Wu Qinkong could suppress him. Even in the Battle of Destiny, he didn't lose too badly. But recently, he was killed by Lu Shaoqing in the secret realm of the same mansion. If it weren't for the life talisman, he probably wouldn't have survived. Now, he was defeated by a mere commander of the Enforcer army. This was a great humiliation. From now on, his name, Wu Tsang, would become a laughingstock. How could he not be angry and resentful? If he knew that Lu Shaoqing and the commander of the Enforcer army in front of him were the same person, how would he feel? Bastard, just you wait. You're dead for sure. Wu Tsang roared and retreated quickly, planning to retreat first. Since you're here, where do you want to go? Why don't you lie down with your junior brothers? Lu Ming stepped out. His body was like a flash of light. He dashed to Wu Tsang in a few moves. How dare you! Wu Tsang roared. Lu Ming wanted to suppress him and make him lie there with the other disciples of Celestial Martial Sword sect. How dare he! He was the second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword sect. He was completely different from the other prodigies. Suppress. Lu Ming's eyes were cold. He stepped in the air and the power of the 9 dragon sky-stomping steps was unleashed. He took 7 consecutive steps toward Wu Tsang. Bam! 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 Chapter 1109. Bam! Lu Ming's body fell and stepped on Wu Tsang's body once again. Wu Tsang shrieked in pain as his cultivation was completely sealed by Lu Ming. He could not muster any strength at all. The crowd gasped. The disciplinary army commander was too ruthless. He even dared to suppress Wu Tsang. How overbearing! Lu Ming grabbed Wu Tsang and threw him to the side of the other 3 disciples of the Tianwu Sword sect to lie on the ground. The 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples looked at each other before looking at Wu Tsang with an interesting expression. Initially, they had been suppressed by Lu Ming and were lying on the ground like dogs eating feces. They felt extremely humiliated. However, at the sight of Wu Tsang lying on the ground, they suddenly felt much better. Even a genius like Wu Tsang was suppressed and forced to lie there. It made sense that they were forced to lie there as well. Ah! Wu Tsang howled like a wild beast. He was furious, especially when he saw the strange looks from the crowd. He wanted to kill himself. Of course, it was just a thought. How could he bear to die? He had a bright future ahead of him. Where are you going? At this moment, Lu Ming looked at a person in the air not far away. That person was Shifang. When he saw that even Wu Tsang was suppressed, he almost peed in his pants. Just as he was about to sneak away, Lu Ming saw him. He revealed a smile that was uglier than crying and said, Ming Lu, what are you trying to do? What am I trying to do? As an Imperial Dragon Guard, you actually brought people from the Sky Martial Sword sect to deal with the disciplinary hall. You colluded with the enemy. What do you think I'm trying to do? Lu Ming sneered. His true energy erupted and he grabbed at Shifang. Shifang turned pale with fright. He wanted to retreat, but he felt a terrifying force enveloping him. He couldn't move at all. In the next moment, a force pulled him down, and he fell heavily to the ground. Ah, no! He screamed. Bam! Lu Ming lifted his leg and stepped on Shifang's dantian. Shifang's entire body arched like a big prawn. He then let out a heart-wrenching scream. My cultivation base! My cultivation base! You've crippled my cultivation base! Shirfan let out a roar of despair. The spirit embryo in his dantian had been crushed by Lu Ming. Crippling your cultivation is your punishment. Scram! After saying that, he kicked out. Shirfan was kicked away like a rubber ball. He turned into a black dot and disappeared in the air. It was unknown how far he flew. As for whether he would fall to his death, Lu Ming was too lazy to think about it. All right, the harvest is not bad. What are you guys waiting for? Bring them all back to the law enforcement hall. Lu Ming looked at Tai Xing and the others and said, Bring him back to the law enforcement hall? Tai Xing and the others looked at each other with unsightly expressions. Nonsense! Only by bringing them back will we have the capital to negotiate with them. Do you think that the Celestial Martial Sword faction will let this matter rest just because you let them go? Don't just stand there. Bring them away. With a wave of his hand, Lu Ming grabbed Wu Tsang and flew toward the Hall of Justice. Helpless, Tai Xing and the others could only lead the other 3 disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction to follow Lu Ming. There's going to be a show to watch. This matter will definitely provoke the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Let's go and take a look. This commander is indeed impressive. However, with the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction taking action, let's see how he's going to deal with this. Let's go and take a look. There were tens of thousands of people in the crowd. They followed Lu Ming from afar and headed toward the law enforcement hall. Moreover, the number of people was increasing. Not long after Lu Ming and the others left, Xiezhen and Shijing rushed over. When they heard that Wu Tsang was suppressed by Lu Ming, both of them were dumbfounded and in disbelief. They were confident that Lu Ming would be beaten half to death by Wu Tsang or even killed on the spot. However, the outcome was the complete opposite of what they expected. Let's go to the law enforcement hall. Xiezhen brought Shijing and rushed to the law enforcement hall. When Lu Ming brought Wu Tsang and the others back to the law enforcement hall, the remaining members of the law enforcement army were stunned. Following which, their eyes were filled with fear. Lu Ming had actually suppressed a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword faction and even Wu Tsang. This was going to break the heavens. If the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction were to go berserk, how would they deal with it? We are the law enforcement army. We enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What are you afraid of? Follow my instructions and get to work. Lu Ming shouted. He then gave Tai Xing and the others some instructions. As for Lu Ming, he threw Wu Tsang and the others on the ground and lined them up in a row. He took out a wooden armchair and sat there, closing his eyes to rest. The onlookers looked at each other. This commander of the law enforcement army was really bold. At this moment, he was sitting leisurely on the armchair with his eyes closed. The sky above the law enforcement hall was filled with people. As time passed, more and more people arrived. This was different from the previous incident against the Huang family. This time, it was against the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Moreover, the suppression of a second-grade genius had caused a huge commotion. Many people were shocked and rushed over to watch. Xiezhen and Shijing had arrived. There were even second-grade geniuses from other overlords. The crowd saw Jing Kongling, Kong Xian, and Sandalwood Fairy. There were also Sanguinarium, Yin Bupo, and the others. There were at least 7 or 8 of them. These geniuses were shocked when they saw Lu Ming sitting on the armchair with his eyes closed. Wu Tsang was as famous as them. However, this ordinary-looking law enforcement army commander was so powerful that he could suppress Wu Tsang. This shocked them. The royal family of the ancient Saint dynasty indeed has a strong foundation. To think that they would have such a powerful law enforcement army commander! Some of them thought to themselves. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky. The crowd felt as though there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. There was a terrifying roar from the aura. Under the pressure, the crowd opened up a path for 3 old men to step through the air with gloomy faces. The 3 old men were dressed in white robes and carried ancient swords on their backs. There seemed to be endless sword chi roaring around their bodies. Just their aura alone was shocking. They're here! The crowd was shocked. The elders of the celestial martial sword faction were here. At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky. The 3 experts of the celestial martial sword faction stepped through the air and stopped above the law enforcement hall. Bastard! You're finished! You're dead! Ha ha! You're dead! When Wu Tsang saw the arrival of the 3 old men, he yelled out in joy. Bam! Lu Ming stood up and stepped on Wu Tsang's face, causing his face to fall heavily onto the ground. Wu Tsang took a mouthful of mud and struggled wildly. He was so frustrated that he was about to explode. The crowd was shocked as well. Lu Ming dared to do such a thing in the face of 3 elders of the celestial martial sword faction. He was simply lawless. The gazes of the 3 elders were as sharp as swords, landing on Lu Ming. How dare you! One of the old men bellowed. His eyes were extremely sinister as he scolded. Kid, do you know who you have taken down? Aren't they just a few trash from the celestial martial sword faction? Why? Do you think that you're proud of raising a few trash? Lu Ming curled his lips and said casually. Chapter 11:10. How presumptuous! How bold! You deserve to die! The 3 old men of the Tianwu sword sect yelled with cold gazes. Their bodies were engulfed in powerful sword intents. Ha ha, you asked for it. That despicable son of a bitch is dead for sure. The 8th Prince Xiejun let out a hollow laugh. Kid, you should commit suicide. Everyone in the law enforcement hall should commit suicide as well. Then I'll forget about this matter. Otherwise, not only you, but your families and the forces behind you will not be able to escape punishment. The old man who spoke first continued to speak. His tone was filled with an air of superiority and indisputability. His gaze swept across Tai Xing and the others, causing them to feel a chill down their spines. Ha ha! Lu Ming burst out laughing all of a sudden and stomped his foot on Wu Tsang's face, causing him to cry out in agony. His lips curled upward as he stared coldly at the old men of the Tianwu sword sect and said, Punish? Let this matter rest? What a joke! What right do you have to punish us? We are the ones who should be punished. The disciples of the Tianwu sword sect have killed someone in the sacred city for no reason. We, the disciplinary army, are enforcing the law on behalf of the sacred emperor. However, the Tianwu sword sect dares to attack the disciplinary hall openly. Are you looking down on the royal family? Are you looking down on the sacred emperor? Do you really think there's no one in the royal family? The old men of the Tianwu sword sect were enraged after hearing the words. They stared at Wu Tsang, who was still under Lu Ming's foot, with an unpleasant expression. Lu Ming had used the royal family and the sacred emperor to pressure them. Even if they did not care about the royal family and the sacred emperor, they could not say it out loud. After all, the ancient sage dynasty was still the ruler of the world. Furthermore, they were currently in the sacred city, which was the core territory of the ancient sage dynasty. No matter how arrogant the Tianwu sword sect was, they would still be intimidated. Kid, what will it take for you to let them go? The old man who had spoken first said coldly as he glanced at Wu Tsang and the others. Wu Tsang was a second-grade genius who had a chance to become a martial emperor. They could not afford to lose him, thus they decided to save Wu Tsang first. Let them go. Sure, but since they have committed a crime, they should be punished. How about this? You can pay the ransom. 500,000 primordial stones for the 3 trashes. Wu Tsang? 2 million ores it is, Lu Ming said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the whole place exploded. Extortion. This was blatant extortion. To think that this puny commander of the law enforcement army would dare to extort a powerful being of the Sky Martial Sword sect. He was truly blinded by greed. The 3 old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect were seething with anger as their eyes turned red. Even though they had lived for thousands of years, they had never met such a daring person. To think that he would dare to extort them, the Sky Martial Sword sect. Bastard, I'll kill you! The old man who spoke first was enraged. He couldn't bear it any longer and let out a long roar. A terrifying sword chi condensed and slashed towards Lu Ming. 4th level spirit god. This old man was a 4th level spirit god expert, and his battle prowess was several times stronger than Wu Tsang. Lu Ming's glabella glowed as a small red pagoda appeared and rapidly expanded. This small pagoda was the Emperor's spirit weapon that Lu Ming had obtained in the Sacred Mansion Mystic Realm. After so many days of refining, Lu Ming had already begun to refine it. The aura of the Emperor's spirit weapon in the small pagoda was also completely restrained. Outsiders could not sense it at all. Lu Ming wanted to take this opportunity to test the power of the small pagoda. After all, there were countless pagoda-shaped spiritual weapons in the world. Lu Ming wasn't afraid of being recognized as long as he withdrew his aura. Lu Ming grabbed the body of the pagoda and smashed it towards the sword light. With a loud boom, the sword light was shattered. Lu Ming's body didn't move at all. The Emperor's spiritual weapon consumes too much true essence. I really can't bring out much of its power, Lu Ming muttered to himself. He had used up a large amount of true essence in the previous attack. Even a martial emperor would be envious of an emperor's spiritual weapon. It was normal that he couldn't bring out its power. As he muttered to himself, he put the small pagoda away. He wasn't satisfied, but the others were already stunned. Lu Ming could actually block the attack of a 4th level spirit god expert. He was too strong. At this moment, Lu Ming was unfathomable in the eyes of the crowd. Every time others thought that he had reached his limit, the strength he displayed would exceed their imagination. You're just a law enforcer. Your treasure is good, but let's see how many of my moves you can take with just your treasure. The elder from the Sky Martial Sword sect shouted angrily. His aura became even more shocking. A sword light shot up 10,000 meters high, and the sword's power was vast and terrifying. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll take me for a sick cat. Kill! Lu Ming shouted. A long spear condensed in his hand, and he pierced it towards a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple. Puff! The Sky Martial Sword sect disciple screamed miserably as he was nailed to the ground by Lu Ming. Lu Ming used a thunderous method to tell them not to think that he didn't dare to kill. Give me the Origin Stone as a ransom. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you. Lu Ming's voice was very cold. Lu Ming wouldn't miss such a good opportunity to extort a sum of money. Purely absorbing the spirit energy of heaven and earth for cultivation was too slow. After such a long time, Lu Ming's current cultivation level was only at the mid-second level of the spirit god realm. If he could devour a large number of primordial stones, his cultivation level would improve rapidly. However, he lacked resources now. There was still half a month before the million-year national sacrificial ceremony began. The competition set by the Sacred Emperor would also begin. Lu Ming's goal was to get into the top 3. The Sacred Emperor could agree to one condition for the top 3. However, it wasn't that easy to get into the top 3. When Yang Patian and Tuoba Shi were in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm, their cultivation had already reached the peak second-level spirit god level. Now that some time had passed, it was very likely that they had made a breakthrough. If a genius like Yang Patian had reached the third-level spirit god level, it would be more troublesome for him to defeat him. Moreover, there were 5 such geniuses in the central continent and Nanning. It wouldn't be easy for the geniuses of the western desert to get into the top 3. However, if Lu Ming's cultivation also broke through to the third-level spirit god level, he would have full confidence. How dare you! Bastard, you're courting death! Kill! Lu Ming's killing of a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple completely enraged the 3 elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect. Terrifying auras erupted, and sword chi soared into the sky. Their killing intent was incomparably cold, as if winter had arrived. Especially the auras of the other 2 elders, they were even more terrifying than the one who attacked before. They definitely surpassed the 4th-level spirit god level. Such experts wanted to join forces, and their momentum was too shocking. The law enforcement flag, please! Lu Ming suddenly shouted. The law enforcement flag is here! Within the law enforcement hall, Tai Xing rushed out with a large flag. Lu Ming took it and stabbed it into the ground. It was a 10-meter-long flag with a sword and a saber embroidered on it. It was incomparably sharp and looked like a real saber and sword. However, the flag looked very old, and was even covered in dust. It was obvious that it hadn't been used for a long time. Chapter 11:11. It's the law enforcement flag. The law enforcement flag that rules the world. The law enforcement flag that was created by the ancient Saint Emperor. Discussions broke out in the crowd as many of them had serious looks in their eyes. The law enforcement flag was created by the ancient Saint Emperor when he created the law enforcement army. It was used to rule the world. 30,000 years ago, wherever the law enforcement flag passed, everyone would tremble in fear. However, after the war 30,000 years ago, the ancient Saint dynasty was weakened and the law enforcement army was useless. Since then, the law enforcement flag had lost its deterrence. It had been many years since anyone took out the law enforcement flag. However, the moment the law enforcement flag was taken out, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Do you think you can stop us by taking out the law enforcement flag? How naive! You must die today! An old man yelled out as he took a step forward. With every step he took, swords she would spread out, slicing apart the void one after another. This was an existence that surpassed the 4th level of the spirit god realm. In fact, it was even higher than the 5th level. He was too strong. How dare you! The law enforcement flag is here. We are the law enforcement army. By raising the law enforcement flag, we represent the ancient Saint dynasty, the royal family, and the ancient Saint Emperor. You people from the Sky Martial Sword sect have no respect for the royal family and the ancient Saint Emperor. Are you people from the Sky Martial Sword sect trying to rebel and destroy the CF family and replace them? Lu Ming stood straight and pointed his spear at Wu Tsang's back as he shouted. His words swept through the crowd like a storm. The 3 old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect looked terrible and solemn. Lu Ming's accusation was too big. He directly accused them of wanting to rebel and destroy the Xia family. Although the Sky Martial Sword sect really had such thoughts, how could they say it out loud? Moreover, the Sky Martial Sword sect didn't have the strength to do so now. The Sky Martial Sword sect has wild ambitions. You look down on the royal family and the royal power. Today, the 8th prince is here. Are you going to rebel in front of the 8th prince and look down on the royal power and the Xia family? How can the 8th prince tolerate you? At the end of his words, Lu Ming looked at Xiejin. Lu Ming had noticed Xiejin a long time ago. Everyone else also turned their gazes to the 8th prince. Xiejin's face fell as he cursed Lu Ming 1,000 times in his heart. Lu Ming was using him as a shield. But what could he do in this situation? Lu Ming took out the banner. The banner had been created by the ancient sage emperor. His ancestor had represented the face of the Xia clan. Lu Ming was a member of the law enforcement army, acting on behalf of the sage emperor. If the celestial martial sword sect wanted to make a move against Lu Ming, or even kill Lu Ming, it would be the same as slapping the Xia clan's face. In this sort of situation, Lu Ming had once again dragged him into the water. If Xiejin didn't do anything, and word of this reached the ears of the other members of the Xia clan, or even the sage emperor, he would have to bear the consequences. Moreover, there were more than a dozen princes at the moment, and they weren't very harmonious. They were fighting openly and covertly. If he didn't handle it well today and cause the imperial Xia family to lose face, there was no guarantee that the other princes would use this point to attack him. Thinking of this, Xiejin gritted his teeth, wishing he could chop Lu Ming into pieces. 8th prince, am I wrong? Lu Ming continued to ask. You're right. In the end, Xiejin gritted his teeth and stepped down from the air to stand beside Lu Ming. He faced the 3 elders of the celestial martial sword sect and said unwillingly, The 3 of you, Commander Ming Lu is right. This time, the celestial martial sword sect's disciple committed the crime first. The law enforcement army will handle this impartially to protect the imperial clan's face. After saying that, Xiejin felt even more disgusted than if he had eaten a dead rat. He felt so sullen, so sullen. What was his goal in transferring Lu Ming to the law enforcement army? Wasn't it to let Lu Ming offend these major powers and then be slapped to death by them? But now, he had achieved the early results, but the later results were completely different from what he had expected. Not only was Lu Ming not slapped to death, in the end, he had to step in personally to protect Lu Ming. What kind of situation was this? He felt so sullen. He hated Lu Ming so much that he almost broke his teeth. The eighth prince is right. As expected of the imperial clan's outstanding talent. You three old men, if you want to kill me today, you'll have to step over the eighth prince's dead body first. Come on, if you have the ability, come on! Lu Ming shouted. Xie Zhen almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What did he mean by stepping over the eighth prince's dead body to kill him? Xie Zhen was so angry that he almost vomited blood. However, he couldn't back down now. He could only glare at the three elders of the celestial martial sword sect while gnashing his teeth. In the eyes of others, Xie Zhen had a strong sense of righteousness, and wasn't afraid in the face of danger. However, they didn't know that it was because he was angered by Lu Ming. The three elders of the celestial martial sword sect had ugly expressions. The eighth prince, Xie Zhen, wasn't Lu Ming. If they killed him, then so be it. Xie Zhen was the son of the sage emperor, and they were in the holy city. If they dared to kill Xie Zhen in front of everyone, they would definitely incur the wrath of the imperial clan Xie family. They wouldn't be able to leave the holy city. Among the crowd, there were many members of the law enforcement army who came from the other law enforcement halls to watch the show. They felt their blood boiling and their hearts were filled with joy. All these years, the members of the law enforcement army had been too cowardly and sullen. Their lives were worse than dogs. When the people from the major factions committed crimes, they had to take out origin stones and treasures to ask the other party to apologize. How were they going to live their lives? Now that they saw this scene, they felt a sense of exultation. It felt too good. Law enforcement army, law enforcement flag, the current sage emperor is enforcing the law. A burly man shouted and stepped out. A large flag suddenly appeared in his hand. Law enforcement flag. At this moment, another law enforcer from the law enforcement hall stood beside Lu Ming, holding the law enforcement flag in his hand and inserting it beside Lu Ming's law enforcement flag. Law enforcement army, enforce the law on behalf of the sage emperor. Another group of people shouted and rushed out, standing behind the burly man. All of them were from another law enforcement hall. There were more than 100 of them. Haha, that's right. Law enforcement army, enforce the law on behalf of the current sage emperor. Another person laughed and rushed out. Another law enforcement flag appeared and was placed in a row with the first two. Haha, I'm here too. Enforce the law on behalf of the current sage emperor. With loud roars, law enforcement army members appeared one after another. Law enforcement flags appeared and were placed in a row. In the end, a total of 9 law enforcement flags were placed in a row, fluttering in the wind. Law enforcement hall members from all over the holy city had arrived. They took out their law enforcement flags and were ready to fight alongside Lu Ming and the rest. Nearly 1,000 people stood behind Lu Ming and Xie Zhen, glaring angrily at the 3 old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect. Usually, they would swallow their anger and suffer in silence. But today, they were ready to go all out. The surrounding crowd looked at the scene in shock. 9 law enforcement flags were out. How many years had it been since something like this happened? Today, it happened again because of Lu Ming. Now, what would the Sky Martial Sword sect do? Damn it! Xie Zhen roared in his heart. But in this situation, he could only hold on. Chapter 11-12. They could neither advance nor retreat. If they advanced, they would offend the ancient Saint dynasty. If they retreated, they would lose all their dignity. They looked coldly at Lu Ming, their eyes filled with murderous intent. They could not wait to tear Lu Ming into pieces. It was all because of Lu Ming that such a situation had occurred. Just as the two sides were in a standoff, a ray of golden light appeared from afar and shot towards them. It was so fast that many people could not react to it. Before they could react, the ray of golden light had already appeared in front of them. A dignified middle-aged man appeared in the air with his hands behind his back. He was wearing a golden dragon robe, a golden crown, and a pair of golden boots. He exuded a majestic aura that made it difficult for everyone to breathe. It was as if they were facing a human king who was inspecting the world. "Royal Uncle!" Siejin exclaimed when he saw the middle-aged man. Everyone was shocked. If Siejin called him Royal Uncle, he must be the younger brother of the current sacred emperor. An important figure from the imperial Xia family had appeared. "As expected, it has appeared." Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. Today's matter had blown up. Lu Ming was certain that the Xia family of the royal family would definitely send someone to protect the dignity of the royal family. After all, although the ancient Saint dynasty was weak, it was still the strongest force in the central continent. Siejin's royal uncle looked at Siejin and nodded. "You are not bad." He then looked at the three elders of the celestial martial sword faction and said, "There are rules in the holy city. You are not allowed to kill innocent people in the holy city. If you have a grudge, you can fight on the battle stage. No one cares about your life or death. However, killing innocent people in the holy city is an act of disrespect to the ancient Saint dynasty. The law enforcement army should enforce the law. You are guilty." Siejin's royal uncle's voice echoed throughout the area. Everyone was shocked. Then, they realized what was going on. The ancient Saint dynasty was nearing the end of 1,000,000 years, and things had gotten out of hand. The imperial Xia clan had to protect the dignity of the imperial clan. If they were to compromise in front of the Sky Martial Sword sect, the imperial clan would lose even more of their dignity in the future. If today's matter hadn't been blown out of proportion and the celestial martial sword sect's expert had slapped Lu Ming to death, everything would have been over. But now that things had gotten out of hand, the imperial Xia clan had no choice but to support the law enforcement army. The three elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect had ugly expressions on their faces. They were well aware of this fact. "Then what do we have to do to let him go?" The three elders of the Celestial Martial Sword sect exchanged glances. One of them spoke up, clearly admitting defeat. "The law enforcement army naturally has its own rules. You can discuss with the commander of the law enforcement army about what to do," the middle-aged uncle said. "I've already stated my conditions. Just do as I said. If you're guilty, you should be punished." Lu Ming squinted his eyes and chuckled. The three elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect had gloomy expressions. After pondering for a while, one of the elders took out a storage ring and waved it a few times before tossing it over to Lu Ming. Lu Ming caught it and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. His face darkened as he said, "Why are there less than 500,000? Don't you want this guy anymore?" Lu Ming pointed at the disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect that he had killed. "You've already killed him. Do you still want to keep him?" one of the elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect asked. "A corpse is still a person. If you don't want his corpse, I'll throw it out to feed the dogs," Lu Ming said indifferently. "You!" The elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect was filled with killing intent. However, Lu Ming looked at him indifferently without any fear. In the end, the Sky Martial Sword sect had no choice but to give in. For the sake of their reputation, they could only take out another 500,000 origin stones. "Trash! Take them away!" Lu Ming waved his hand and Wu Tsang and the other three disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect flew into the sky. An elder waved his hand and caught them. He stared coldly at Lu Ming and said, "You are good. Very good. I hope you can stay in the sacred city and the enforcer army forever." After saying that, he snorted and turned into three sword lights, disappearing from the place. Huff! Huff! The crowd of onlookers let out a long sigh of relief. Their eyes were still filled with disbelief. This matter had actually ended just like that. The elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect had charged in aggressively, but in the end, he left behind a few million origin stones and left with his tail between his legs. Before this, no one had expected such an outcome. Everyone's gaze landed on Lu Ming, this awesome commander. Before this, no one would pay attention to a mere commander of the Enforcer army. However, he had attracted everyone's attention now. First, he suppressed Wu Tsang with his powerful combat strength. Then, he blocked the attack of a level 4 spirit god expert. Although Lu Ming used a treasure, it still proved his powerful combat strength. However, what was more important was his courage and wisdom. He dared to face the Elder of the Sky Martial Swords sect alone, and was good at borrowing the power of the Imperial Xia family. He even borrowed the power of the ancient Saint Emperor who created the Enforcer army to force the Elder of the Sky Martial Swords sect to retreat with his tail between his legs. It was hard to believe that all of this was done by this bearded man. With such means, if this person was 10 years younger, he would be able to compete with all the heroes in the world. Junior, let's go! In the sky, the middle-aged Imperial uncle glanced at Xiezhen before looking at Lu Ming. What's your name? The middle-aged Imperial uncle asked. Ming Lu. Lu Ming replied in a tone that was neither humble nor overbearing. Ming Lu? Good. You are very good. The middle-aged Imperial uncle said a few words before waving his hand and leaving. He has ill intentions towards me? Lu Ming looked at the sky and pondered. Lu Ming didn't feel any kindness from the middle-aged Imperial uncle. Instead, he felt ill intentions. After pondering for a while, Lu Ming revealed a cold smile on his face. He could roughly guess why the middle-aged Imperial uncle had ill intentions towards him. Now, the ancient Saint dynasty wanted to form an alliance with some overlord forces to increase their strength. However, although Lu Ming seemed to have defended the dignity of the Imperial family, he had also offended the Sky Martial Swords sect. Moreover, he had forced the Imperial family to offend the Sky Martial Swords sect. It would be harder for the Imperial family to form a good relationship with the Sky Martial Swords sect in the future. The middle-aged Imperial uncle naturally didn't have a good impression of Lu Ming. In his heart, he probably wanted to slap Lu Ming to death for being a busybody. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He didn't mind. After all, he had infiltrated the Imperial Dragon Guards and then the Enforcers because he wanted to use this identity to investigate Xian Yanqing's whereabouts. When he found Xian Yanqing in the future, he would just leave. Who would be able to find him? Mighty! The commander is mighty! At this moment, the Enforcers were the most excited. They were so excited that they were trembling. It was as if they had eaten a chilled watermelon during the hottest days of the year. They had been sullen all this time. However, today, they could finally hold their heads high. Even an overlord force like the Sky Martial Swords sect had admitted defeat before the Enforcers, paid a large amount of origin stones, and left with their tails between their legs. This kind of satisfaction was brought about by a sudden outburst after a long period of sullenness. It was better than anything else. Chapter 11-13. Commander is invincible! Commander is mighty! Commander Ming is mighty! At first, it was Tai Xing and the others who were shouting. Later on, the other Enforcers from the disciplinary hall also shouted. Lu Ming raised his hands and the crowd quietened down. Brothers of the Enforcers, I'm grateful for your help this time. Lu Ming cupped his fists and said. The 9 Enforcers' flags were also a form of deterrence. Commander Ming, you're too courteous. It's because of you that our Enforcers can hold our heads high and let out the frustration in our hearts. We should be the ones thanking you. That's right. We should be thanking you. The others spoke one after another. Everyone, you're too courteous. Since you're all here today, I'll treat everyone today. Let's have a good time. Tai Xing, bring some of your brothers and buy some food. Lu Ming took out some origin stones and handed them to Tai Xing. All right. Tai Xing took the origin stones and brought a few of his men out in a hurry. At the same time, the crowd in the sky also dispersed one by one. Soon, everyone had left. However, the news of what had happened that day spread like wildfire. This time, it was different from the incident with the Huang family. The previous incident with the Huang family only attracted the attention of a small number of people and became the topic of gossip. This time, It was against the overlord force, the Sky Martial Sword sect. Naturally, it caused a stir. As for the awesome Commander Ming Lu, his reputation soared. Some people even called him the most awesome Enforcers commander in the past 30,000 years. Soon, Tai Xing bought a large amount of food and wine. In the disciplinary hall, a banquet was held. There were more than 1,000 enforcers drinking and chatting in the disciplinary hall. It was late at night before they dispersed. Tai Xing, here are 500,000 origin stones. Take them and share them with your brothers. After the other enforcers left, Lu Ming took out a storage ring and handed it to Tai Xing. Commander, this won't do. You risked your life to get these. We didn't contribute anything. Tai Xing waved his hands. The others shook their heads. Although they were poor, they still had their principles. Take it. If it weren't for you guys supporting me from behind, why would the Celestial Martial Sword faction be afraid of us? Take it and divide it. Lu Ming handed the storage ring to Tai Xing, then returned to his room alone. After closing the door, Lu Ming entered the mountain river diagram. With a wave of his hand, a huge pile of ores appeared before him. A total of 3 million. It's time to break through to the third level of the Spirit God realm. With a thought, Zhang Xian summoned the bloodline of the 9 dragons. Opening his mouth, he swallowed 100,000 ores and began assimilating them. As the primordial stone continued to be refined, Lu Ming's cultivation level increased rapidly. From the late second level of the Spirit God realm to the peak second level of the Spirit God realm, he started to break through to the third level of the Spirit God realm. 3 days passed in a flash. After Shaochun refined 3 million primal stones, the quintessence in Lu Ming's body surged endlessly. It was like countless true dragons roaring in Lu Ming's body. After a while, it slowly calmed down. I've finally reached the third level of the Spirit God realm. However, I've used up all 3 million origin stones. Lu Ming opened his eyes. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. The consumption was huge, but the gains were huge as well. In a short 3 days, Lu Ming's cultivation advanced from the middle stage of the second level of the Spirit God realm to the early stage of the third level of the Spirit God realm. Lu Ming's combat prowess soared once again. Lu Ming was very confident about the competition that would take place in more than 10 days. Almost 2 years have passed since Martial Monarch D sealed the Talisman Puppet Sect. The Talisman Puppet Sect can only last for 5 years. There are still a little more than 3 years left. At that time, will I be able to deal with D? Lu Ming could not help but think of the Talisman Puppet Sect. When he thought of this, he felt a lot of pressure. It was too difficult to reach the level where he could deal with D in the remaining 3 years. Based on Lu Ming's current progress, it was almost impossible. Lu Ming shook his head. There was no point in thinking too much. He could only push forward and do his best. Lu Ming stretched his back. His bones vibrated and crackling sounds came from his body. He stood up and walked out. In the following days, Lu Ming regained his calm. Apart from cultivating every day, he would walk around the holy city. Ever since the incident at the Tianwu Sword Sect, the disciples of the various overlords became much more well-behaved in the holy city. Especially in the area under Lu Ming's jurisdiction, they did not dare to attack others for no reason. Even if there was a grudge, they would fight it out on the platform. Lu Ming's days were leisurely and carefree. Soon 10 days passed. The day of the ancient Saint Dynasty's million-year national sacrificial ceremony was approaching. During this period, the holy city was unusually lively. Lu Ming could see experts from various places as he walked on the streets. The Northern Plains martial artists were all tall and sturdy. Even the women were mostly tall. The weapons they used were either spiked maces, giant hammers, or giant axes. They were all heavy weapons, and their auras were wild. They rode on all sorts of mounts, making them easy to recognize. There were also some martial artists who had a gloomy aura. They were either filled with ghost chi or blood chi. Everyone who passed by them gave off a cold feeling. They were all martial artists from the southern underworld. There were also some monks with bright heads wearing kasayas. Naturally, they were holy monks from the western desert. On the other hand, Lu Ming did not see many people from the eastern wilderness. On this day, the ancient Saint Dynasty's million-year national sacrificial ceremony finally began. Buzz. There was a buzzing sound in the sky. There was a strong fluctuation. Lu Ming, Tai Xing, and the others walked out of the law enforcement hall and flew into the sky to watch. They saw that the sky above the holy city was filled with colorful clouds and heavenly music. The space was constantly distorted in the light. Rumble. Finally, a huge platform appeared in the sky. The platform was neither made of gold nor jade. It was filled with colorful lights. There were dragons and phoenixes flying in the sky. There was also a qilin walking around. Of course, it was not real. It was formed by a formation. Then, tables and chairs appeared on the east and west sides of the platform. The tables and chairs were made of fine jade. There were dragons and phoenixes carved on them. They were extremely luxurious. There were many of them. At a glance, there were more than 10,000 of them. All of them were suspended in the air above the holy city. When the tables and chairs appeared on the east and west sides, a jade staircase appeared in the north. There were 99 steps. At the end of the staircase, a huge ancient altar appeared. The altar was ancient and heavy, as if it had gone through the vicissitudes of time. It was 10,000 meters tall and disappeared into the clouds. "The Holy Emperor has arrived!" Suddenly, a voice came out from the palace. The voice rolled and spread throughout the entire holy city in an instant. In the palace, heavenly music sounded. Holy light filled the air and shot up into the sky. Then, a group of people stepped into the air. The person at the front was wearing a golden robe embroidered with a picture of the human king patrolling the world. He looked to be in his 50s. He was tall and sturdy. His body was filled with holy light. There were stars shining in his eyes. He was filled with endless majesty. Chapter 11-14. Beside Xie Qitian, there were two old men with white hair. They looked ordinary, but they exuded a terrifying aura. Lu Ming had seen this aura more than once. The aura of an emperor. The two elders besides Xie Qitian were also sovereigns. In this way, including Xie Qitian, the imperial Xie family had 3 sovereigns at once, which was really terrifying. That was just on the surface. Lu Ming did not believe that there were no emperors in the imperial family. There was a rumor that the previous emperor of the ancient Saint Dynasty might still be alive. The ancient Saint Dynasty was indeed an ancient force that had been passed down for millions of years. Even though it had weakened, it had a strong foundation and was not something that an ordinary overlord force could compare with. Behind Xie Qitian and the two old men, there were more than 10 men and women. All of them had the looks of dragons and phoenixes. The older ones were middle-aged while the youngest ones looked like they were in their 20s. There were a total of 15 people and they were the children of the current emperor. They were the princes and princesses of the ancient Saint Dynasty. Xian Yanjuan. Lu Ming's heart trembled. In the crowd, he saw a woman who looked extremely similar to Xian Yanqing. However, compared to Xian Yanqing, she was even colder and more holy. She was like an inviolable goddess who stood high above the masses, looking down on them. Besides Xian Yanjuan, there was another lady who was in her 20s. She was in her prime and she was extremely beautiful. Although the lady did not look like Xian Yanjuan and Xian Yanqing, she was still a rare beauty. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. That lady must be the other princess, Xian Yanling. However, he did not see Xian Yanqing. They did not even let Shao Qing appear on such an important day. They really don't treat Shao Qing as their own child. Lu Ming clenched his fists. He also saw Xie Zhen and the 10th prince, Xie Yan. Lu Ming had never seen the other princes before. Behind the princes and princesses, there were some concubines, nobles, ministers and some experts of the ancient Saint Dynasty. There were more than 1,000 people who stepped out and landed on the platform in the air. "The arrival of the sage emperor, please take your seats." It was that same voice again. It spread through the entire holy city. The person who transmitted the voice was definitely a Zoom cultivator. As soon as he finished speaking, a loud laugh rang out. "Ha ha, is Yinyang Palace the first to arrive?" A burly, white-haired old man wearing a long robe with the pattern of the yin-yang fish on it arrived in the air with a group of people. This old man's aura was terrifying and shocking, suppressing the heaven and earth. An emperor, this was another emperor. "The yin-yang emperor of the yin-yang palace and his disciples have arrived." That voice resounded throughout the holy city. "I wonder how many big shots will come today." Beside Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the others were already so excited that their eyes were shining. The Yinyang Palace was also an overlord force in the central continent. It was extremely powerful and was no weaker than the Sky Martial Sword sect. "Brother Yinyang, please have a seat." Xie Qitian raised his hand. "Thank you, brother." The Yinyang Divine Emperor cupped his fists and led the experts of the Yinyang Palace to a nearby table. "The Demon Emperor of Mount Tianyao has arrived." Immediately another big force arrived. It was the overlord force of the central continent. Mount Tianyao was very similar to the Myriad Demon Valley in the eastern wilderness. They were both gathering places for demonic beasts and were led by a demon emperor. Yu Xian Martial Emperor of Mount Xiankong and his disciples have arrived. Cold Blood Hall, Heavenly Sun Palace. Next, many overlords of the central continent arrived one after another. Moreover, each overlord force was led by an emperor. Soon, more than a dozen emperors appeared on both sides of the platform in the sky. In the holy city, countless people's eyes lit up as they looked at this scene in shock. More than a dozen emperors gathered together. This lineup was too shocking and terrifying. It was so rare that it would not happen even once in many years. Perhaps many emperors had gathered in the ancient city of fate in the last battle of fate, but that was in the ancient city of fate. Ordinary people could not see it at all. But now, more than a dozen emperors were in full view of the public. As for the supremes, there were even more, but they were completely overshadowed by the emperors. More than a dozen emperors. What kind of power was this? If they joined forces, they could really destroy the world. Bai Zhan, Martial Emperor of the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army, has arrived. Suddenly, a voice was heard, and the crowd fell silent. Everyone turned to look in the same direction. There, a middle-aged man in black armor walked over. Behind him, a group of people followed. Everyone was wearing armor, and their auras were wild and their fighting spirit was soaring. Everyone was filled with an extremely strong fighting spirit, as if they were ready for a big battle at any time. "Hiss, the heaven-guarding divine army is here." Someone sucked in a breath of air and whispered among themselves. In the central continent, if there was a force that was not weaker than the ancient Saint dynasty, it would be the heaven-guarding divine army. If there was a force that hated the ancient Saint dynasty the most, it would be the heaven-guarding divine army. The heaven-guarding divine army was originally the strongest army of the ancient Saint dynasty. There were many experts in it, and they were invincible. Back then, they had helped the ancient Saint dynasty suppress the world and everyone feared them. They were known as the heaven-guarding divine army. However, in the war 30,000 years ago, the heaven-guarding divine army chose to watch from the sidelines. In the end, the heaven-guarding divine army caused the imperial Xie family to suffer heavy losses. The heaven-guarding divine army then announced that they would leave the Xie family and dominate the world. Some people said that if the heaven-guarding divine army had participated in that war, the imperial Xie family would not have suffered such heavy losses. They would not have been unable to control the world and the current situation in the central continent would not have happened. Therefore, the imperial Xie family viewed the heaven-guarding divine army as a traitor and an enemy. In the past 30,000 years, the two sides had fought many terrifying battles. However, the two sides were on par with each other in terms of strength. They had suffered losses and neither side could do anything to the other. Yang Patian, one of the 5 great youths, was from the heaven-guarding divine army. Originally, some people thought that the heaven-guarding divine army would not come today. However, they did not expect the heaven-guarding divine army to be here. Moreover, the heaven-guarding divine army was leading the team. Xie Qitian's eyes shone brightly as he stared at the heaven-guarding divine army. He said, "Today, everyone is a guest. Please take a seat. You're welcome, the heaven-guarding divine army said casually as he led the team to a seat at the side. The third underworld emperor of the south has arrived. The western desert's Wumia Buddha emperor has arrived. The northern plains experts have arrived. The supremes of the eastern wilderness Heavenly Deity Palace, Heavenly Corpse Sect, and Sky Monster Valley have arrived. Following that, announcements were made one after another. In the south, an underworld emperor of the south had arrived. Ghostly Chi filled the sky as he led a group of experts. In the west, an old monk had a benevolent smile on his face. He wore a simple kasaya and his body was covered in golden light. There was a Buddhist halo above his head. This was a Buddha, also known as the Buddha Emperor. He was an emperor. As for the northern plains and eastern wilderness, no emperors had arrived. That was because the northern plains and eastern wilderness were the same. There were several major forces entrenched in the northern plains and they were at odds with each other. The emperors could not leave, otherwise, their enemies might take advantage of the situation. The Wang family's patriarch, Wang Xingtian, and the Jiang family's patriarch. Chapter 11:15. There were two leaders from Emperor Heaven Divine Palace, the Wang family head and the Jiang family head. As for Sky Corpse Sect and Sky Monster Valley, they each had two supreme martial artists leading them. After everyone had taken their seats, some smaller forces, such as Medicine King Valley, who did not have any sovereigns, came and took their seats on both sides. Of course, those who were able to take their seats were all reputable forces. At the very least, they had a supreme martial artist. Those smaller forces were not qualified to take their seats. After half an hour, everyone had arrived. Let the ceremony begin! As the voice sounded, the huge altar started to shine. Endless light bloomed and the entire holy city was shrouded in the light. Xie Qitian stepped out and climbed up the 99 stone steps to the bottom of the altar. The imperial family, Xie family, and the ministers all looked solemn as they faced the altar. All the experts from the powerful forces in divine region also stood up. The first ceremony is for the first sacred emperor since ancient times, Xie Qitian said as he bowed to the altar. Ceremony was not for the heavens, but for the ancestors. Martial artists were supposed to go against the heavens. Naturally, they would not offer a ceremony to the heavens. For the first sacred emperor since ancient times. The imperial family and the ministers followed Xie Qitian and bowed. As for the people from the other forces, they just looked and did not bow. If it had been 30,000 years ago, everyone would have bowed. But now, all the major forces had lost their respect. It was good enough that they could come. Naturally, no one would bow with the imperial family. Just as Xie Qitian and the rest were bowing, a beam of light shot up to the sky from the altar. Then, a statue appeared. This statue was the first sacred emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty 1,000,000 years ago. He was also the one who had founded the ancient Saint dynasty. Then, Xie Qitian bowed again to offer a ceremony to the second sacred emperor. Similarly, another statue appeared. It was the statue of the second sacred emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty. Then, the ceremony continued. On the altar, statues of the past sacred emperors of the ancient Saint dynasty appeared one after another. On the altar, there was a terrifying aura. It was as though the past sacred emperors had been revived. In the end, there were a total of 108 statues on the altar. They represented the 108 sacred emperors who had passed away. The ancient Saint dynasty had been around for 1,000,000 years and there had been more than 100 sacred emperors. There's no statue of the previous sage emperor. Could it be that the previous sage emperor is still alive? Someone noticed something fishy. Indeed, there was no statue of the previous holy emperor. If the previous holy emperor had already passed away, his statue would definitely appear here. However, it didn't appear now, which meant that the previous holy emperor was still alive. Many sovereigns of the overlord forces had solemn looks in their eyes. Although the imperial Xie family had weakened and could not be compared to 30,000 years ago, they were still not to be underestimated. Hee, that old fellow is indeed still around. The 100 Battles martial emperor of the Heaven Suppression Army sneered. The sacrificial ceremony is over. Bestow wine and pills. Xie Qitian's voice was heard. He then waved his hand and the space split open. The huge altar entered the space crack and disappeared. Then, tables and chairs appeared where the altar used to be. The members of the Xie family, as well as the nobles and ministers, sat down at the tables and chairs. Bestow wine and pills! A voice resounded throughout the entire area. Heavenly music was heard again. At the same time, large cauldrons appeared in the palace. These large cauldrons were as big as mountains. Under the large cauldrons, there were burly men who were naked. Each of the burly men carried a large cauldron and walked in the void. Bam! Bam! These large cauldrons seemed to be extremely heavy. Every time the burly men took a step, the space would vibrate and ripple in the void. At a glance, there were a total of 108 burly men carrying 108 cauldrons that were as big as mountains. They walked in the void and appeared in the sky above the holy city. After the 108 burly men, another 108 young women appeared. They were all dressed in light muslin, and their curves were graceful. Every single one of them was a peerlessly beautiful woman. Each of the 108 beautiful women held a purple golden gourd in their hands. Bestow spiritual wine and spiritual pills. Hurry up and grab more. Tai Xing and the others' eyes lit up as they stared at the sky. Pour! A voice was heard. Ha! The burly men shouted as they turned the large cauldrons and poured the wine down. Immediately, the spiritual wine in the large cauldrons poured out. Each cauldron was as big as a mountain, and it was unknown how many kilograms of spiritual wine it contained. At this moment, 108 large cauldrons fell at the same time as if 108 waterfalls were falling from the sky. It was extremely spectacular. Moreover, these were all spiritual wines, not ordinary wines. They were made from spiritual herbs and were very useful for the cultivation of martial artists. Whoosh! The spiritual wine fell from the sky and the rich wine fragrance filled the entire holy city. It was intoxicating to smell it. Ha ha, mine! Me too! In the holy city, countless martial artists rushed into the sky and used their methods to draw the spiritual wine to their side. During this process, they could use various methods to obtain the spiritual wine. However, they were not allowed to attack or kill others. Otherwise, they would be killed without mercy. That was the rule. No one attacked or killed others. They only used their own methods to obtain the spiritual wine. Whoosh! Lu Ming opened his mouth and sucked. There seemed to be a vortex in his mouth. The spiritual wine in the sky gathered into a bundle and was swallowed into his mouth. When the wine entered his mouth, it immediately turned into a warm current that flowed throughout his body. It was very comfortable. The medicinal power of this spiritual wine is not of much use to me. Lu Ming smiled and stopped trying to snatch it. Although the spiritual wine was not of much use to spirit god martial artists, it was definitely of great use to those below the spirit god realm. The lower the cultivation, the greater the effect. Those at the Sea of Soul realm and King realm could definitely increase their cultivation and condense their true yuan. 108 cauldrons that were as big as mountains filled the sky. It was unknown how many kilograms of spiritual wine they contained. The entire holy city was raining spiritual wine. However, not a single drop fell to the ground. They were all pulled by true yuan and collected. Soon, there was not a single drop left in the sky. Bestow pills! Then, the voice sounded again. 108 beautiful women pulled out the lids of the gourds in their hands and poured them down. Immediately, pills were poured out of the gourds and scattered all over the holy city. Those gourds might not look big, but the space inside was like a storage ring. It was unknown how many pills were stored in them, and they continuously scattered on the ground. Countless people's eyes lit up as they used all their strength to collect the pills. Lu Ming waved his hand, and a dozen pills were immediately caught in his hand. Lu Ming glanced at them and found that these pills were not of much use to him. However, they were quite useful to those below the spirit god realm. Among them, there were all kinds of pills. There were healing pills, recovering true yuan, detoxifying pills, increasing cultivation, and so on. Chapter 11:16. What extravagant spending! Lu Ming exclaimed. Although the spirit wine and pills were not of a high level, there were too many of them. With such a terrifying amount added together, the value was enormous. The Xie family of the imperial family had put in a lot of effort for this sacrificial ceremony. Obviously, the imperial family had been preparing for a long time. Otherwise, they would not have taken out such a large amount of spirit wine and pills. In the air, the people from the major factions watched with faint smiles. Not long after, the pills in the gourds were emptied. The burly men and women carried the cauldron and the gourds and flew back to the imperial palace. Then, young girls flew out of the imperial palace with all kinds of delicacies and wine, placing them in front of the people from the major factions in the air. Ha ha ha! Today is the million-year anniversary of the sacred dynasty's establishment. Thank you all for coming here and spending this day with me. Come, let me offer you a toast! Xie Qitian raised his wine cup and drank with the major factions. Then, Xie Qitian continued, I believe everyone has heard that I intend to choose a young talent as my husband for my daughter, Nian Lin. Today, all the talents from all the factions in the Divine Region and the 5 major dominions are here. We will have a competition. Regardless of gender, everyone can participate. The person who wins first place will be Nian Lin's husband. Of course, if a woman wins first place, her husband will be pushed back by 1 rank. At the same time, I promise that I will agree to one condition of the second and third place. As long as it is within my power, I will allow you to enter the sacred Emperor Ancient Palace to cultivate. The 4th to 10th place can also enter the sacred Emperor Ancient Palace. It's here. When Xie Qitian said that, many people's eyes lit up. It was finally time for the most anticipated segment of the day. Xie Qitian's conditions were too tempting. Not many people could resist. Today, all the geniuses of the Divine Region were gathered. There would definitely be an exciting battle. Back then, the War of Providence had taken place in the ancient city of Providence. Not many people had seen it, and not many knew how exciting it was. But today, they could see it. Moreover, it wasn't just the Middle Continent's heaven's prides today. The South Underworld, West Desert, North Plains, and East Barren Territories' heaven's prides had all gathered. Most importantly, numerous top geniuses had stepped into the domain enlightened spirit god realm in succession, and they were about to carry out the strongest battles in the domain enlightened spirit god realm. This was undoubtedly something that everyone looked forward to even more. Many young heaven's favorites in particular were rubbing their fists and rubbing their palms, ready to show off their skills. Brother Xie, how should we compete? The Yin-Yang Emperor of Yin-Yang Palace asked. There are too many geniuses here today. It's impossible to compete with them one by one. Firstly, you have to be below the age of 30. Then you have to go through a round of selection. Only those who pass the selection can enter the official competition, Xie Qitian said. Then, he waved his hand, and from the south of the platform, paths condensed by rainbow-colored lights appeared. There were a total of 18 paths, spreading out in the shape of a fan that was 100 miles long. There were tables and chairs on both the east and west sides of the platform, and they were all filled with people. Only the south side was empty. Xie Qitian must have had a plan. The selection process is very simple. Everyone has to go through this path. Those who pass will be considered to have passed, Xie Qitian said. Those who pass through this path will be considered to have passed. Many people's hearts trembled as they looked at the 18 paths with a slightly solemn expression. Since it was a selection process, it was definitely not that simple. There would definitely be obstacles on the path. Those who want to participate, enter through that door. Xie Qitian waved his hand, and a huge door appeared at the end of the 18 paths. On the side of the imperial family, experts flew towards the door and stood guard on both sides of the door. Only those who passed through the door could participate in the selection process. Let's go. I'm going. Immediately, many young figures flew out from the great forces. There were also young figures flying out from the holy city, flying towards the door. Haha, I'm going. Lu Ming smiled at Tai Xing and the others. You're going too? Commander, the sacred emperor said that only those below the age of 30 can participate. How old are you? Tai Xing and the others looked at Lu Ming suspiciously. Lu Ming had a full beard now. No matter how one looked at him, he didn't look like he was below the age of 30. He was at least close to 40 years old. Moreover, martial artists aged very slowly. Lu Ming's actual age might be a few hundred years old. Lu Ming actually wanted to participate. If he was caught trying to make up the numbers, he would have to bear the consequences. Hey, what's with your expressions? I'm not even 30 years old, alright? Lu Ming looked at Tai Xing and the others in disdain before striding towards the door. Not even 30 years old? Tai Xing and the rest of the enforcers stared with their eyes wide open. Their jaws were almost dislocated. It was simply unbelievable. Lu Ming swaggered to the door. At this moment, there was already a long queue at the door. Lu Ming lined up at the back. Who is that? That bearded man, why is he lining up at such an old age? Isn't that the awesome commander? What is he doing? Didn't he hear the sacred emperor say that only those below the age of 30 can participate? This weird commander is really audacious. Watch carefully. He will definitely be chased away later. Some people noticed Lu Ming and started to discuss among themselves. Lu Ming couldn't be bothered with the surrounding gazes and lined up leisurely. Soon it was Lu Ming's turn. Hold it. What are you doing here? Leave quickly. A burly man guarding the door stopped Lu Ming. What am I doing? I'm here to participate in the competition. Lu Ming glared. Competition? The sacred emperor has ordered that those above the age of 30 are not allowed to participate. How old are you? How dare you ignore the sacred emperor's order? You're courting death. The burly man bellowed with an imposing manner. Haha, this weird commander is finished. He dares to ignore the sacred emperor's order. The commotion here naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. Nonsense. Which eye of yours saw that I'm over 30? Let me tell you, I'm not 30 yet. I'm just a little older. Don't judge a book by its cover, Lu Ming said casually. This made many people stunned and then burst into laughter. Lu Ming didn't look like he was under 30. He was definitely over 30. This guy was clearly trying to sneak in. Many people thought so. You get out of the way, don't block the way. A cold shout came from behind Lu Ming. It was a woman's voice. It sounded very pleasant, but very cold and arrogant. Lu Ming turned his head and saw a beautiful woman. She was tall and beautiful. She was not inferior to Sandalwood Fairy, Jing Kongling, and the others. That's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Zhongzhou State. Some people discussed and looked at Lu Yusin excitedly. So it's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Zhongzhou State. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but take a few more glances. Chapter 11-17. There were 3 or 4 young men surrounding Lu Yusin. They were clearly Lu Yusin's escorts. Standing in the middle of the 3 escorts, Lu Yusin was like the moon surrounded by stars. She was extremely cold and arrogant. She glanced at Lu Ming nonchalantly. There was slight disdain in her eyes. She was like a proud white swan. Big beard, what are you looking at? Is Yusin for you to look at? Why don't you take a piss and look at your reflection? You're already so old, yet you still want to join the competition. Do you want to marry Princess Nian Lin? You're really out of your league. Get lost! Beside Lu Yusin, a few young men berated him one after another. These people obviously came to the sacred city later and didn't know about Lu Ming's achievements. Where did these wild dogs come from? Don't you know the rules? I'm here first. I haven't entered yet. Line up for me. Do you understand? Lu Ming cast a nonchalant glance at the few of them, his eyes full of contempt. You! What did you say? You're courting death. Trash! The young men's faces were ugly as they berated. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't fight here, they would have killed Lu Ming. Lu Yusin's face was also ugly and gloomy. Obviously, Lu Ming's words had included her. This trash doesn't respect the sacred emperor's order. He's obviously over the age limit, yet he wants to sneak in. I suggest that we kill him immediately as a warning to others. A young man in a red robe was the loudest. What if I'm not over the age limit? Lu Ming glanced at him. If you're not over 30 years old, I'll kneel down and eat dirt immediately. The young man in a red robe shouted. He looked at Lu Ming carefully and was even more certain that Lu Ming's age couldn't be below 30 years old. Okay, I want to test my bone age. Lu Ming shouted and his voice spread far and wide. Approved. Let him take the test. A majestic voice was heard. It was Xie Qitian's voice. Naturally, the rulers had witnessed everything that had happened here. Yes. Besides Xie Qitian, an old man flew out. With a wave of his hand, a mirror appeared. This is the bone testing mirror. It can test your bone age, the old man explained. Then, a beam of light shot out from the bone measuring mirror and enveloped Lu Ming. At this moment, almost all eyes were on Lu Ming. Could it be that Lu Ming was really under 30 years old? That's impossible. He looks like he's almost 40 years old. His actual age must be even older. 1. At this moment, the bone-testing mirror shook. Then, 25 wheels appeared, shining with golden light and filling the air. This was the bone wheel. Each wheel represented 1 year. On the bone measuring mirror, there were 25 wheels, which meant that Lu Ming was only 25 years old. Moreover, the 25th wheel was not very bright, which meant that Lu Ming was still a little short of 25 years old. The scene suddenly quieted down. Everyone stared at Lu Ming with their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Oh my God, he's not even 25 years old. This awesome commander is not even 25 years old. How is that possible? He looks like he's almost 40 years old. He's growing too fast. What an eyesore! If he's not even 25 years old, doesn't that mean he belongs to the younger generation? He suppressed Wu Tsing before. There was an uproar at the scene. However, when the last sentence was said, the scene suddenly became quiet again. Yes, if he's not even 25 years old, he belongs to the younger generation. Most importantly, he suppressed Wu Tsang. If Lu Ming was really in his 30s or 40s, or even older, and suppressed Wu Tsang, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, he had been cultivating for many years. However, Lu Ming was only in his 20s, which was younger than Wu Tsang. This meant something different. It meant that this awesome commander was a rare supreme talent who was stronger than Wu Tsang. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This awesome commander was too awesome. It really exceeded everyone's expectations. It wasn't that no one had thought that Lu Ming was someone else in disguise. However, if he wanted to enter the law enforcement army, he would have to go through a background check. If he could disguise his appearance, could he also change his aura? Damn this guy! Wu Tseng naturally saw this scene from inside the gate. He immediately gritted his teeth and wanted to bite Lu Ming. Some people from the Sky Martial Sword sect had ugly expressions. They had suffered a great loss because of this commander. The eyes of some emperors flickered as they sized Lu Ming up curiously. Oh my God, Commander, he's only 25 years old? Tai Xing and the rest were completely stunned. If it wasn't for the bone measuring mirror that measured Lu Ming's bone age, they would still find it hard to believe. Behind Lu Ming, Lu Yusin and the other young men's eyes almost popped out. The red-robed young man almost bit his tongue off. Can I enter now? Lu Ming looked at the burly man guarding the gate. Yes. Yes, haha. The burly man laughed awkwardly. And you, what did you say just now? If I'm below 30 years old, you will kneel down and eat dirt. Let's begin now. Lu Ming looked at the red-robed young man and said coldly. This? That? I was just saying it casually. I was just saying it casually. The red-robed young man's face flushed red and he was extremely embarrassed. Bullshit! Lu Ming roared and stared at the red-robed young man furiously. Even his beard stood up. A powerful aura burst out and shrouded the red-robed young man. He berated. "Where do you think you are? All the sovereigns are here and the Saint Emperors are seated. How dare you speak casually in front of the Saint Emperors? Who do you think the sovereigns are? Do you think they are the targets of your jokes? I think you are courting death." Lu Ming's every word was like a giant hammer that hammered the red-robed young man's heart. His face turned pale and there was no trace of blood. "No, I didn't. You are spouting nonsense. I didn't disrespect the sovereigns." The red-robed young man shook his head repeatedly with cold sweat dripping down his face. "You're still denying it? Then why don't you do as you say? If you don't do it, I'll teach you." Lu Ming roared and moved his body. He suddenly appeared in front of the red-robed young man and pressed his hand down on the red-robed young man's shoulder. This red-robed young man was a third-class prodigy with a perfected spirit embryo cultivation. He was worlds apart from Lu Ming and had no power to resist at all. Lu Ming pressed him down and they fell to the ground. Bang! After landing on the ground, the red-robed young man immediately knelt down. Next, Lu Ming pressed his head down to the ground. With a bang, the red-robed young man's face smashed into the ground and smashed the ground, causing him to eat a mouthful of dirt. Gulp! Many people in the surroundings swallowed their saliva and stared at Lu Ming with their eyes wide open. This awesome commander was too tyrannical. He really did what he said and made the red-robed young man eat dirt. Impudent! On the west side of the platform, an elder from a large force slammed the table and shouted angrily. This force was Cold Blood Hall, and the red-robed young man was a prodigy from Cold Blood Hall. Many people from Cold Blood Hall glared fiercely at Lu Ming. Calm down. Chapter 11-18. Just now, it was indeed the red-robed youth who said that if Lu Ming was below 30 years old, he would have to kneel down and eat dirt. Everyone, including the sovereigns, had heard it. Lu Ming directly used the sovereigns to suppress the red-robed youth before attacking. Cold Blood Hall could not stand up for the red-robed youth. Interesting. Interesting indeed. He's very bold. Some of the sovereigns around the platform said faintly as they looked at Lu Ming with great interest. What a good appetite. It's the first time I've seen someone who likes to eat dirt instead of delicacies. Lu Ming muttered as he stepped into the air again and came to the gate. Those from Cold Blood Hall were so angry that they almost vomited blood. Lu Yusin gritted her teeth and glared at Lu Ming with an ugly expression. On the other hand, the few young men beside Lu Yusin looked at Lu Ming with fear. They were shocked that the red-robed youth could not fight back against Lu Ming. "Girl, why are you glaring at me? Be careful or I'll spank you." Lu Ming glanced at Lu Yusin's perky bud, then laughed and walked through the gate. Lu Yusin's eyes were red. She swore to herself that if she had the chance, she would make Lu Ming regret it. Lu Ming walked through the gate and came to the front of the 18 paths. Some of the geniuses looked at Lu Ming curiously. They were all very curious. When did such a genius appear? Slowly, more and more people came to the front of the 18 paths. In the end, there were no less than 500 people, all of whom were top geniuses. Okay, let's begin. Remember, if you fly out or land on this path, you'll fail. Xie Qitian's voice rang out. Whoosh! Whoosh! Immediately, someone rushed up. There was one person on each path. When they rushed onto the path condensed by the rainbow light, a figure appeared on the path and attacked the geniuses on the path at the same time. As the palm print blasted out, the 18 youths on the 18 paths roared and were sent flying out of the range of the rainbow light path. Failure! In an instant, all 18 youths were defeated. That's the strength of a spiritual god! It's actually the strength of a spiritual god! There are spiritual deities blocking the way. How are we going to charge through? This is too difficult. Many people's expressions changed greatly, becoming very ugly. Along the way, there were actually spirit gods obstructing them. How could those youths in the spirit embryo realm possibly charge through? Looks like a lot of people will be eliminated during the screening phase. That's indeed the case. With a spiritual deity blocking the way, how many people can charge through? That's normal. The Saint Emperor also said that only the top 10 can enter the Saint Emperor's ancient palace. So what if those spirit embryo realm geniuses manage to enter? You're just here to make up the numbers. You might as well get eliminated earlier. Around them, many people were discussing animatedly. On each of the rainbow paths, there was a figure standing with their hands behind their backs. Although they were not real, there was still a powerful aura spreading out. As long as I charge over, I might still stand a chance. Some people's eyes flickered as they began to calculate. Whoosh! Whoosh! Then, another 18 people rushed up. Boom! Boom! The 18 of them struck out with their palms at the same time. Their palms were like raging waves, unceasing and unending. Among them, 17 of them were directly sent flying by the palms and were eliminated. However, there was one person who was a third-class genius. Moreover, he was a powerful figure among the third-class geniuses. His cultivation was infinitely close to the spiritual deity level. He took the palm head-on, but he was not sent flying. Instead, he seized the opportunity, aimed for an opening, and executed an extremely powerful movement technique to charge through. He charged through that figure's obstruction. Haha, I've made it! I've succeeded! The young man was ecstatic as he rushed forward. However, before he could rejoice, another 3 figures condensed in front of him. Each of the 3 figures was at the first level of the spirit god realm. 3 powerful palms surged toward the young man. You can't play like this! The young man shouted as he was sent flying by the powerful palms. 3 spiritual deities, 3 spiritual deities! How are we going to pass? Many people sighed. It was already difficult to pass one, but now, there were 3 on the road ahead. How was it possible to pass? It's almost impossible to pass if you're not a spiritual deity. Someone shook his head. However, there were still people who did not give up and wanted to give it a try. The facts proved that every road was the same. There was only one first-level spirit god at the beginning, and 3 first-level spirit gods at the end. Of course, the strength of these figures was considered ordinary among the first-level spirit gods. Many people failed. Lu Ming saw Shuijiani and Shi Zhan of the Heavenly Corpse sect, Dong Fa Yu of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace, Ao Tu of the Sky Demon Valley, Feng Xian, and the others fail one after another. Although their talent was considered top-notch in the Eastern Wilderness, it was very ordinary in the vast Divine Wilderness continent. None of the first few batches succeeded. Until the 6th batch, a second-class genius made a move. This person was an old acquaintance of Lu Ming, Sanguinarum. Sanguinarum directly sent the first spiritual deity flying with a move and rushed past. Then, he faced 3 spiritual deities, but it did not cause much trouble for Sanguinarum. Sanguinarum struck out 3 times in succession and repelled the 3 figures before he rushed past. What was shocking was that before Sanguinarum reached the end, more figures condensed on the road. This time, a total of 9 figures appeared. 9 experts at the first layer of the spirit god realm. Boom! 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 The 9 figures struck out a palm at the same time. The 9 palms connected, and the palm force was like a landslide. Sanguinarum's face turned serious. A bloody light flashed and condensed into a blood-red battle saber. He slashed out continuously and broke the 9 palms one by one. However, the 9 figures struck out again after the first palm strike. 9 consecutive palm strikes converged and erupted with terrifying power. The 9 figures seemed to be of one mind, and their cooperation was flawless. A sharp cry resounded. Sanguinarum directly executed bloodline fusion and transformed into a bloodwing bat. He emitted a terrifying sound wave that broke through the palm force, and then his wings were like blades that slashed out and slashed one of the figures into 2. He forcefully charged through the gap and flew forward swiftly. After he charged past the 9 figures, there were no more obstructions behind him, and his path was unobstructed. Sanguinarum became the first person to charge onto the platform. Even then, it still caused many people to have dejected expressions. The difficulty of this was too great. The joint forces of 9 first-level spirit gods were too formidable. Besides those who had broken through to the spirit god realm, who else below the spirit god realm could charge through? But now, besides second-class geniuses, no one in the younger generation had broken through to the spirit god realm. Alas, forget it. It's impossible for me to have any hope. The gap is too great. Someone shook his head and sighed with the intention of giving up. There's indeed no need. There's no hope at all. There's no need to embarrass yourself. That's right. Let's just be a spectator this time. Many people spoke and gave up successively. Humph! What a waste of time! At this moment, a cold grunt resounded as a young man stepped forward. Chapter 11-19. Nan Ming, Underworld Child! Someone whispered as they looked at him with fear. Underworld Child was rumored to be on par with the 5 giants of the central continent. However, he had never fought with any of the 5 giants before, so many people were suspicious of him. The 5 giants of the central continent were all outstanding geniuses. Not everyone could reach that level. Who would believe it without seeing it with their own eyes? Boom! Suddenly, Underworld Child's aura skyrocketed as a terrifying pressure filled the air. Then whoosh! Underworld Child turned into a ray of light as he charged forward without stopping. His speed was terrifyingly fast. In the first stage, Underworld Child rushed past the figure who had just sent out a palm strike. Underworld Child's body exploded and did not obstruct Underworld Child at all. In the second stage, 3 figures attacked at the same time, but the result was the same as the previous figure. Underworld Child rushed past the 3 figures and caused them to explode. Underworld Child's speed was not affected at all. It was as if the 3 spiritual gods were air. Underworld Child's figure was like a ray of light. In the third stage, 9 figures could not obstruct Underworld Child at all. All 9 figures exploded as well. Whoosh! Underworld Child's figure appeared on the platform. Hiss, gasps could be heard at the scene. Underworld Child was too powerful and terrifying. Ordinary first-level spiritual gods were nothing in front of him. In the eyes of many people, Underworld Child had just turned into a ray of black light and arrived on the other side in a flash. The time he used was shockingly short. Too terrifying. His strength is far beyond ordinary second-level prodigies. He has definitely reached the level of the 5 giants. Not bad. This is going to be interesting. The geniuses of the other domains will clash with the 5 giants. It will definitely be exciting. Underworld Child's strength shocked everyone. Haha, then I'll go too. A young man in a golden robe stepped out with a loud laugh. This person was golden in color. He had golden hair, golden clothes, and golden boots. His body emitted rays of golden light as if he was a small golden sun. Lion Metropolis, one of the 5 giants. Someone recognized this young man. Lion Do was from the Lion Tiger Hall, an overlord force. It was said that he was a golden lion with 90% of the bloodline of the divine beast Sun Lion. He was extremely powerful. 90% of his bloodline had almost become a pure sun god lion. However, there were almost no innate pure-blooded divine beasts in the divine wilderness continent. Those demon emperors had all transformed into pure-blooded divine beasts when they broke through to become emperors. However, this was an acquired cultivation success. There was still a huge gap between them and innate pure-blooded divine beasts. Lion Capital, let's go together! As soon as Lion Do stepped out, another young man wearing a 5-colored feather robe also stepped out. Everyone was shocked as they recognized this young man. Kong Lin was a supreme genius of the Wanao Mountain, an overlord force. It was said that he had 90% of the bloodline of the divine beast 5 elements peacock and was exceptionally powerful. Similarly, they were 2 of the 5 magnates of Zhongzhou State. Among the 5 magnates of Zhongzhou State, 3 were from the human clan and 2 were from the demon clan. Kong Lin. Shirdo looked at Kong Lin and grinned. The two of them looked at each other and moved almost at the same time. A ray of 5-colored light and a ray of golden light respectively rushed towards a different path. Whoosh! Whoosh! Almost without stopping, the light flashed past. Just like Underworld Child, the spiritual deities blocking their path were directly blasted apart. They did not stop them at all. In an instant, the two of them had already appeared on the opposite platform. The 5 magnates are really powerful. Many people sighed. This was the strength of the 5 magnates. Compared to them, ordinary geniuses were too far away. Even many second-class geniuses felt powerless. My hair, this poor monk is coming. A Buddhist chant that Lu Ming was very familiar with sounded. A monk with a baby face and a smile stepped out. This unscrupulous monk. Lu Ming curled his lips. Amitabha. A crisp Buddhist chant sounded. A petite figure stepped forward and came to a path next to the unscrupulous monk. A female bodhisattva. What a beautiful female bodhisattva. Many people's eyes lit up. It was actually a nun. She was petite and wore a snow-white kasaya that was spotless. Her body was filled with holy Buddhist light, like a female bodhisattva who walked out of a painting. She was very beautiful. Even if she did not have 100,000 strands of hair, she was still peerless and holy. One could not bear to look away after taking a glance at her. What a pity! Such a peerless beauty who is not inferior to the 5 beauties is actually a female bodhisattva. Sigh. Many people sighed and felt that it was a pity. Hee, the 2 bald donkeys of the western desert are going to fight. Let me accompany you. With a sneer, a young man in a black robe with black flames all over his body stepped out and appeared on another path. Someone recognized that this person was a genius of the southern underworld. Bam! Bam! On the other side, 2 tall figures stepped out at the same time, attracting everyone's attention. They were Yang Patian and Tuoba Shur of the northern plains. Haha, it's really lively. I'll go then. The unscrupulous monk smiled. His body was filled with Buddhist light, and with a flash of light, he rushed forward. At the same time, the others also moved. They turned into rays of light and rushed forward. On the way, the figures of the spirit gods were useless. The next moment, on the opposite platform, Yang Patian, Tuoba Shur, the unscrupulous monk, the female bodhisattva, and the young man covered in black flames arrived almost at the same time. Almost everyone was stunned. How is this possible? There are so many prodigies of the 5 magnates? Many people gasped and stammered. It was unbelievable. Yang Patian had long been one of the 5 magnates of the Middle Continent. This was not surprising. As for Tuoba Shur, he had fought with Yang Patian a few times and was already famous in the Middle Continent. As for the unscrupulous monk, his performance in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm of the World Academy had also spread. Everyone also treated him as one of the 5 magnates. Those 3 people were not surprising. However, the female bodhisattva and the young man covered in black flames were also terrifying. It was too shocking. Don't tell me those 2 are also as strong as the 5 magnates. How can they compete? The top 10 spots are almost all taken up. Many people sighed. First, it was the Nether Child, followed by Lion Do and Con Lin. Now, there were 8 unfathomable existences like them in total. There were not many spots left. Next, many second-class prodigies began to step forward. Now, almost all the second-class prodigies had stepped into the spirit god realm, so such a test was naturally not difficult for them. Those second-class prodigies stepped forward one by one. Lu Ming saw Sandalwood Fairy, Jing Kongling, Kong Xian, Junyu, Dishin, and others. There were also some that Lu Ming did not recognize. This time, most of the prodigies of the Divine Wilderness continent had come. Chapter 11:20. At this moment, a young man with an ordinary appearance stepped forward. This young man was really very ordinary. His appearance was ordinary, and his figure was ordinary as well. He had a medium build, and his face was very calm. He didn't have any overbearing arrogance, nor did he have the noble and domineering aura of a king. He was just like an ordinary young man. However, when this young man walked out, he attracted the attention of everyone. Even the monarch realm experts looked over. Because this young man was Longchen. Longchen was a name that everyone in the central continent knew. Because he was the well-deserved overlord of the younger generation of the central continent. He was invincible and could sweep through all his opponents. All along the way, he had never tasted defeat among those of the same generation. During the Battle of Karmic Luck, he'd stepped into the domain enlightened spirit god realm, and he was far ahead of the other four great figures. He was reputed to be a rare genius of the central continent in 100,000 years. No one spoke. Everyone's gazes descended onto Longchen. They wanted to see how he would perform. Bang! Longchen moved and took a step forward. That's right, it was just an ordinary step. Then, he took another step. Just like that, he took one step at a time, neither hurried nor slow, and walked forward step by step. He traversed several kilometers with a single step. His speed wasn't fast. Not to mention being unable to compare to Yang Patian and the others, he couldn't even compare to second-grade prodigies. He took a few steps and arrived before the first figure. That figure slapped out with his palm. Longchen swung his palm as well. Bang! That figure exploded into pieces. After that, Longchen continued forward. In next to no time, he arrived before the three figures in the second stage. He swung his palm again, and the three figures exploded into pieces. After that, he continued forward and arrived before the third stage. He swung his palm again, and another 9 figures exploded at the same time. He seemed to be very relaxed and carefree. After that, he stepped onto the platform again. His speed wasn't fast, but the speed at which he passed the stage was very fast. Those figures couldn't obstruct him at all. So, in general, he surpassed most second-grade prodigies. This person is unfathomable. Lu Ming stared at Longchen and noticed that he couldn't see through Longchen at all. I'll go as well. Lu Ming smiled and stepped forward. He randomly chose a path and charged forward. Lu Ming's performance wasn't too shocking either. Although he managed to break through at an extremely fast speed, his speed was only average among the second-class prodigies. Therefore, he didn't cause too much of a commotion. Because Lu Ming was able to suppress Wu Tsang before, it was normal for him to have such a result. The others were not too surprised. After Lu Ming passed, several second-class heavenly legends passed the test one after another. After these second-class geniuses passed, no one else tried. The remaining third-class geniuses, and even those who were weaker, all shook their heads. There was no need for them to try, because it was impossible. All right, the screening is over, Xie Qitian said. With a wave of his hand, the 18 rainbow paths disappeared without a trace. At the scene, everyone's eyes fell on the platform. There were a total of 40 people on the platform. In other words, only 40 people had passed the selection. Nan Ming is really something. 2 of them are suspected to be on the same level as the Great Five, and 3 other second-tier prodigies. Northern Plains is also impressive. Other than Tuoba, there are also 3 second-tier prodigies. I think the Western Desert is unfathomable. They have 2 suspected Great Five, but no second-tier prodigies. This isn't realistic. I don't think even the second-tier prodigies are here. I can't see how strong they are at all. Indeed. The Western Desert has always been unfathomable. They have a long history. No one knows how long ago the Western Desert Saint Monk appeared. Speaking of which, the Eastern Wilderness is really awkward. Only one arch passed the selection. Ha! Many people were discussing. Lu Ming looked around. It was indeed so. Central Continent had the most people. Other than him, there were a total of 27 people. 5 from Nanming, 4 from Northern Plains, and 2 from Western Desert. However, the 2 from Western Desert were unfathomable. Eastern Wilderness only had 1 arch. Eastern Wilderness? It's just a barren land. Li Lai is the weakest. How many prodigies can there be? It's already good that they have won the arch. I heard that there's also someone called Lu Ming, who's above the arch, but he didn't come. He didn't come. I'm afraid he's declined, so he doesn't dare to come. He used to be stronger than the arch, but now he's probably weaker than the arch. That's true. Let's not talk about the eastern wilderness. Everyone discussed and expressed their opinions. However, when the eastern wilderness was mentioned, they all looked at it with contempt. In the crowd, Shuijiani, Ao2, Dongfanyu, and the others' faces turned red. However, they felt helpless in their hearts. They had no choice. The eastern wilderness was indeed the weakest. This was an indisputable fact. They used to stand at the top of the eastern wilderness and were full of confidence. They thought that even if they came to Central Continent, they would be able to make a name for themselves. However, ever since they came to Central Continent, they had been dealt a heavy blow. There were too many people in Central Continent who were stronger than them. Even the arch was only a second-tier prodigy. This made them feel dejected. I wonder what kind of name Lu Ming will make if he comes to Central Continent. He'll probably be suppressed and won't be able to do much. At this moment, Shuijiani, Dongfanyu, Ao2, and the others thought of Lu Ming. However, they thought that even if Lu Ming came, he would probably be weaker than the arch. The arch had comprehended the intent of space and was extremely powerful. During the Battle of Providence, the arch's intent of space was still weak. The intent of space would become stronger as one progressed. They believed that the arch had already surpassed Lu Ming. Alright, there are 40 people in total. Now, let's begin the first round. The rules of the first round are very simple. I've already recorded the time you took to pass the selection. Now, according to the time you took to pass, you'll be divided into 2 groups. The shorter the time, the better the result. The top 20 will be in one group, and the bottom 20 will be in the other. The rule of the first round is that the bottom 20 will challenge the top 20. If they succeed, they'll advance directly. If they fail, they'll be eliminated directly. Moreover, each person can only challenge once. Those who are challenged can only accept one challenge, Xiechitian announced. What? The bottom 20 will challenge the top 20. Many people's expressions changed. There was no doubt that Yang Patian, Lion Du, and the others had taken the shortest time, and those who were challenged could only accept one challenge. This meant that someone would definitely challenge Yang Patian, Lion Du, and the others. Wouldn't that mean that they would lose? Now, I'll announce the names of the bottom 20. Wu Tsang, Sanguinarum. Xiechitian announced the names of the bottom 20. Those whose names were called had ugly expressions. At the same time, they began to size up those whose names were not called. I didn't expect to enter the top 20. Lu Ming smiled slightly. Apart from him, Sandalwood Fairy, Jing Kongling, the Arch, and Wu Qinkong, the second-grade prodigies that Lu Ming knew, were all in the top 20. Kong Xian, Jun Yu, and the others were in the bottom 20. Lu Yusin was also in the bottom 20. Her expression was ugly. Chapter 11:21. Yang Patian, Lion Do, Kong Lin, and Long Chen were ignored. Tuoba Shi, Unscrupulous Monk, and other powerhouses were also ignored. Challenging them was no different from admitting defeat. Besides, the Emperor God, who had mastered the space concept, was also excluded. Wu Qinkong, who had always been at the top of the second-grade prodigies, was also excluded. There were also a few others who gave off an unfathomable feeling. There were also Sandalwood Fairy and Jing Kongling, 2 peerless beauties who were pursued by many people. Of course, no one would challenge them. There were only a few people left. Many people's gazes swept over Lu Ming and the other 2 people. Lu Ming had defeated Wu Tsang before, but Wu Tsang was considered weak among the second-grade prodigies. Besides, Lu Ming had used a treasure to block the attack of a 4th-grade spirit god. However, in such an occasion, one would not be allowed to win with a treasure. One had to rely on one's own strength. Therefore, Lu Ming was undoubtedly one of the best targets to challenge. Before we start, I'll say 2 things. First, this is only a competition. You can't kill your opponent. Second, don't rely too much on external items. You have to rely on your own strength, Xie Qitian announced. You, the bearded man, I challenge you. What are you doing? That bearded man is mine. Get lost, all of you. He's mine. As soon as Xie Qitian finished speaking, a few people stared at Lu Ming, wanting to challenge him. Hey, do you all think I'm easy to bully? There was a fierce glint in Lu Ming's eyes as he scanned a few of them. Wait a minute. This is too messy. We'll do it according to the results. Those with good results in the bottom 20 will have priority. As soon as Xie Qitian said that, the place quieted down. Following which, an old man walked out and reported the rankings of the following 20 people one by one. The more they reported, the uglier their faces became. Those with good results would have priority, so they would definitely challenge the weak. In other words, the last one would be the strongest. For example, Longqin, Yang Patian, and the others. Who would challenge them at the beginning? Those who were ranked at the bottom would definitely encounter Yang Patian and the others. How could they be happy? Now let's begin. After the names were reported, Xie Qitian announced. I'll go first. Lu Yusin stepped out. Her results were the best among the 20 people behind her. She almost made it into the top 20. Her gaze swept over the crowd and finally landed on Lu Ming. A cold light flashed in her eyes as she said, Big Beard, I challenge you. Previously, Lu Ming did not give her any face at all, and even suppressed the cold-blood hall genius in front of everyone. In Lu Yusin's view, this was a complete slap to her face. She had long wanted to teach Lu Ming a lesson. Now that there was such an opportunity, how could she miss it? Little girl, you want to challenge me? Like I said before, be careful or I'll spank you. Lu Ming grinned as his gaze swept over Lu Yusin's perky buttocks. You are courting death. Lu Yusin's face turned ugly. This guy is really courting death. Shurdo, one of the 5 magnates, emitted a cold light and murderous intent, causing those standing beside him to tremble. Everyone in the central continent knew that Shurdo had always been Lu Yusin's suitor. Since Lu Ming dared to flirt with Lu Yusin, it was obvious that Shurdo had his eyes on him. Lu Yusin challenged Lu Ming. Everyone else stepped back and stood at the edge of the platform. Only Lu Ming and Lu Yusin stood facing each other on the platform. If I don't beat you until you beg for mercy today, I'm not Lu Yusin. Lu Yusin's beautiful eyes were full of cold light. She was confident that she could defeat Lu Ming, because she had not used her full strength in the selection. Swoosh! Suddenly, Lu Yusin moved. She pounced on Lu Ming. The strange thing was that as Lu Yusin dashed out, there were more and more of her figures. 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In the end, the platform was filled with Lu Yusin's silhouettes. There were hundreds of them, densely packed around Lu Yusin. This is the illusion demon body technique of the Dark Illusion sect. Lu Yusin has actually cultivated it to this level. How shocking! At the edge of the platform, some second-grade prodigies recognized this body technique and had a serious expression. With hundreds of silhouettes appearing all of a sudden, how could he fight back? Lu Yusin's battle strength was considered above average even among second-grade prodigies. Illusion Demon Finger! With a shout, the hundreds of silhouettes stretched out their hands at the same time. Her slender, jade-like fingers seemed slender and weak, but they exuded a power that was more terrifying than that of a divine weapon. They pierced through the void, aiming to kill Lu Ming. Swoosh! Swoosh! There were finger forces in all directions, aiming at the vital parts of Lu Ming's body. A black spear appeared in Lu Ming's hand. Ming Lu was from the Black Spear sect, so he had bought a black spear some time ago. It was a middle-grade level 8 spirit weapon. Swoosh! Swoosh! With a shake of the spear, streaks of black spear flowers condensed in the air and flew towards the finger forces. Bam! Bam! There was a series of collisions, and the spear flowers and finger forces disappeared. One! Then, the black spear radiance expanded and swept out with a force that could wipe out an army. However, Lu Yusin's body technique was indeed impressive. In the face of such an attack, the hundreds of silhouettes on the platform flashed and dodged Lu Ming's spear. Let's see how many spears you can dodge. Lu Ming held the spear and swept out continuously. The spear radiance was like a black dragon, surging on the huge platform and enveloping the entire platform. Although Lu Yusin's body technique was strong, its power was greatly reduced on such a platform. Soon, she could no longer dodge, and the silhouettes were hit by the spear radiance and dissipated. Humph! Lu Yusin snorted and advanced instead of retreating. Her figure flashed continuously at an incredible speed. Lu Ming's spear radiance was like a dragon, but he could not hit her. When she approached Lu Ming, a gray fog appeared above Lu Yusin's head. On the gray fog, there were 8 golden chakras. This was Lu Yusin's bloodline. Great dream of spring and autumn! At this moment, Lu Yusin transformed into a ball of gray fog. The gray fog expanded rapidly, shrouding Lu Ming within it. When Lu Ming was enveloped by the gray fog, the surroundings suddenly changed. Boom! The heavens and earth shook violently. Lu Ming saw an intense battle taking place in front of him. Talisman Puppet Sect! Lu Ming was shocked. The Talisman Puppet Sect was in front of him. At this moment, the yin-yang formation of the Talisman Puppet Sect was broken. The Emperor Heaven Divine Palace's army was swarming in and charging into the yin-yang mountain. At this moment, both sides were fighting a bloody battle. He saw the 9 Sons Prime, Yan Kuangtu, being killed by Martial Monarch Di Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others died at the hands of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace's primes. His parents, his disciples, and his friends were all turned into ashes in the bloody battle. Illusion, illusion, this is an illusion! Lu Ming took a deep breath and his eyes flickered continuously. In the Sacred Mansion's secret realm, he had entered an illusion created by an existence that surpassed the Emperor realm and almost got lost. Compared to that illusion, this illusion was too fake. How could it confuse Lu Ming? Chapter 11:22. At this moment, at the edge of the platform, the geniuses, the rulers, supremes, and many other powerhouses on their seats, as well as the powerhouses in the holy city and the surrounding air, were all staring at the platform. They saw Lu Ming's figure being shrouded by the gray fog. It's Lu Yusin's dream of spring and autumn. That guy called Ming Lu is finished. The outcome has been decided. That's right. Once Lu Yusin's dream of spring and autumn is used, he can only retreat. Once he's shrouded, he'll fall into an endless illusion. Even the top 5 youths would be in danger. Lu Yusin has won. A few second-class geniuses were discussing. They knew how terrifying Lu Yusin's dream of spring and autumn was. This was Lu Yusin's bloodline secret technique. It was very mysterious and unpredictable. After that, no one made a sound and they waited quietly. Lu Ming's eyes were tightly shut in the gray fog. However, 2 minutes later, Lu Ming suddenly opened his eyes. Let's end this! Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile as he shouted. The scene of the Talisman Puppet Sect's battle suddenly froze. Then, it shattered like a mirror and turned into nothingness. Lu Ming was still standing on the platform as the gray fog shrouded him. Break! Lu Ming's palm was like a sword as the 5-colored intent exploded and he slashed down. Boom! Heaven and earth shook violently as the gray fog rolled. It was constantly being destroyed by Lu Ming's true origin. In the next moment, Lu Ming took a step forward and dashed in a certain direction. He grabbed with his claw and a terrifying force suddenly erupted. In that direction, the gray fog was destroyed and Lu Yusin's figure appeared. At this moment, her eyes were wide open and her mouth was agape. Her face was filled with disbelief. His true origin condensed into a huge hand and grabbed Lu Yusin. His true origin surged in and sealed Lu Yusin's major occupants, preventing her from circulating her true origin. As Lu Yusin was grabbed by Lu Ming, the gray fog dissipated. When the crowd saw this scene, they were stunned. Lu Yusin has been defeated and captured. What's going on? Many people did not see what had happened because of the gray fog. They thought that Lu Ming would definitely lose. However, after 2 minutes, the fog dissipated and they saw this scene. Some sovereigns and sovereigns' eyes flickered, but they did not speak. They had obviously seen something. "Let me go!" Lu Yusin struggled hard in the True Origin Hand's hand. But her true origin was sealed. How could she break free with just her physical strength? "Let you go!" Hee, did I forget what I said?" Lu Ming grinned, his eyes darting all over Lu Yusin's body. Lu Yusin stared at Lu Yusin. "What do you want?" "Of course it's to spank you." "Su SSS your will. King Sovereigns you." How? How?" Lu Yusin glared at Lu Ming angrily. Her threat was self-evident. "You dare to threaten me? You're asking for a beating." With a thought, he controlled his true origin and grabbed Lu Yusin. Then, he slapped Lu Yusin's round buttocks. Smack! A clear and crisp sound echoed throughout the entire area. Lu Ming's palms slapped Lu Yusin's butt hard, causing her butt to tremble violently in front of everyone's eyes. Silence. The scene suddenly fell into a dead silence. Countless people stared at the scene with their mouths open. He hit Lu Yusin's butt. After a long time, someone stammered, but he couldn't finish his sentence. They couldn't believe it. The peerless beauty Lu Yusin, who was capable of causing the downfall of nations, was actually being spanked in front of everyone. This was simply inconceivable. How could this Ming Lu be so daring? Lu Yusin was one of the 5 peerless beauties of Zhongzhou State. Of course, more people were envious. Whether young or old, they were envious. Some even had red eyes. They also wanted to slap one of the 5 great beauties of Zhongzhou State, but they didn't dare to. Pervert, lecher. A woman scolded and looked at Lu Ming with disdain. "You're courting death." A loud roar was heard, and a terrifying murderous intent erupted. A golden light soared into the sky. Shudou looked at Lu Ming with murderous intent, wishing he could tear Lu Ming into pieces. As everyone knew, Shudou had been pursuing Lu Yusin. Since Lu Ming dared to treat Lu Yusin like this, he naturally wished he could kill Lu Ming. At this time, Lu Yusin was also stunned. She stared at Lu Ming in a daze. After a long while, she let out an earth-shattering scream. She was actually being treated like this by Lu Ming in front of everyone. She wished there was a hole in the ground and she could crawl into it. You're dead. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Lu Yusin screamed and struggled desperately. What are you screaming for? How dare you threaten me? Hit me again. Lu Ming scolded and slapped her again. The clear and melodious voice once again echoed throughout the entire area. Everyone's eyes were about to explode, especially the men. They were so envious that their eyes turned red. Some of them were so excited that they were trembling. It was as if they had replaced Lu Ming to teach Lu Yusin a lesson. Commander, he, Tai Xing and the other members of the law-enforcing army were completely speechless. They knew that Lu Ming was awesome, but this was too awesome. Even some of the sovereigns and supreme beings at the table felt their eyelids twitching. How dare you! A supreme being from the Serene Fantasy sect couldn't hold it in any longer. He shouted and his supreme being aura spread. However, he was immediately stopped by the sovereigns of the Serene Fantasy sect. Today was the ancient Saint Dynasty's million-year sacrifice ceremony. Many experts had gathered. Besides, Lu Ming and Lu Yusin were having a fair fight on the fighting stage. It wasn't appropriate for them to interfere. Ming, you're dead! The golden light on Shudou's body shone brighter, and terrifying murderous intent shrouded Lu Ming. What are you screaming for? Who are you? Shut the hell up! Lu Ming stared coldly at the lion. He was stunned and berated. The lion was enraged. It almost dashed out to kill Lu Ming. In the end, he held it in. With so many sovereigns here, he didn't dare to break the rules. You still dare to threaten me? Lu Ming looked at Lu Yusin again. I'm going to kill you! Lu Yusin screamed. Smack! Another slap was sent down, and Lu Yusin's screams stopped abruptly. The surrounding people were already numb. This awesome commander is too awesome. He's already defying the heavens. He's completely lawless and audacious. Where did this Ming Lu come from? I've never heard of him before. He seems to have appeared out of nowhere. First, he suppressed Wu Tsang. Now, he's treating Lu Yusin like this. To be honest, I'm really impressed. A Sky Pride spoke. He looked very simple and honest. Everyone recognized that he was a Sky Pride from the soldier manner. I'm me-haired. I'm envious. A Buddhist chant was heard. Everyone was stunned because the person who said he was envious was the heartless monk. However, you're just a monk. What are you envious of? Do you want to go up and have a try? Many people were speechless. Ahmed Bao. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.